Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night. It is Thursday, the 13th of February, 2025. It's a very important date. This show is about that important date and lots of other things. This is Paul English Live here on WBN 324. We're with you for the next couple of hours and a few hours longer over on Rumble. Welcome to the show. We've got what we would call a packed house this evening, this afternoon or this morning, depending what time zone you're in. So many people, it's going to take me an hour to introduce them all, but it should make for an action-packed, chatty space. We're looking forward to the next couple of hours with you. Welcome back. Hi, a quick shout out to all the listeners on WBN 324, all the listeners on Radio Soapbox and elsewhere. We're also streaming out on Rumble, a radio show that goes out on Rumble. We're on YouTube again today, I believe. We're also on D-Live and all sorts of other places, and we're there usually every week. Technical trousers willing. As I mentioned there, today is Thursday, February the 13th, and exactly 80 years ago today, a hellish event unfolded as part of the history of World War II. And we're going to start off, and we're going to talk a lot about that event this evening, because we've got people in the chat, in the studio this evening. I'll introduce them as we go through. But before I do all that, I'm going to start off really with a clip. I've played this before on shows over the previous years, and because it's very relevant and appropriate really to this day, and it's a bit of a bridging sort of clip in the sense that it's delivered by an Englishman who was a prisoner of war at the time and was in Dresden, a gentleman by the name of Victor Gregg. He made a lot of appearances during the last sort of 8 to 10 years of his life on mainstream broadcasting channels such as the BBC. He passed away in 2021 at the ripe old age of 101, about 5 days, I believe, short of his 102nd birthday. So his innings was immense, but his experience, as you're about to hear, was bigger than that. This is from an interview he did about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe about 2015, so I guess that's nearly 10 years ago, with the BBC, and we're going to start off with this to get the show rolling and to set the tone for what we're going to cover for the next few hours.
We were just hearing then some of the first-hand eyewitness accounts from those Germans who survived. Tell us how it was that you were in Dresden at that time.
Well, I would presume they've already told you. But how was it? It was evil. I don't really know what you expect me to say when you say how was it. Thousands of fire bombs dropping all over the place, explosions, heat, fire, people screaming, people burning, people alight. Well, it wasn't. After about half an hour, it started developing into something which was really bad. It started off. It started off rather tame, actually. The first 5 or 10 minutes. The very first wave, as far as I can remember, the mosquitoes dropped the lights, the fairy lights, and then the first lot came over and dropped all these incendiaries. And then, of course, as wave after wave came over, so the impact got heavier. It is about 35 minutes, 40 minutes after the first bombs had dropped, the bomb dropped outside the building that we was in, and killed my mate, Harry, and about 3/4 of the people in there were killed. And so you go out and you come out of there and the whole place is a furnace. It's a furnace. Because we were in the centre of Dresden. And the wind hadn't grown up by that. The fire really, it happened, although it was, bad, naughty, horrible, it was the second wave which really brought the tornado into being. Because then they started dropping the £4,000, blockbusters and 4,000 pounds of napalm, which if it dropped anything within about 300 yards was immediately incinerated. So, and then to feed the fire, so you get the wind coming in. And that's really tornado force. And you just can't. It dehumanises anything that you've experienced before. I've been through 6 years of war. I've lost all but 3 of the 28 blokes I joined up with in 1937. I've been in every battle in the Middle East. I've been in Italy, I'd come home, I'd been captured at Arnhem, but nothing prepared me for seeing women and children alight and flying through the air. Nothing prepared me for that. Before Dresden, I was just an ordinary. I could look at people get killed, well, so they're dead. But after Dresden, I was a nutcase. I was. It just sent me. It took me 40 years to get over it, and I don't think I even laughed for 40 years. I couldn't even laugh at anything. But Dresden itself, yeah, you see people stuck in. They try to cross over to us, a group of them, because I was on a bit of grass with these firefighters, and we'd come back because it was too hot, and we came back to get some clean air, or what we could call clean air, for 10 minutes, have a breather. And this group tried to cross this road, and the first lot of them got stuck in the middle of it. They couldn't get away, and in the end, they caught a light. They were still alive, and then they exploded. You can't talk about it. You can't talk about it because nobody who hasn't experienced it can't grasp it.
And for you, Victor, what you said that it was 40 years before you came to terms in any way with what happened. Did you not speak about it at all in that time?
No. I never even. I think my family thought, as far as the war was concerned, I think they thought I was on a cook's tour. I come out because I was in India in 1938, and then we went to Palestine, and I was in Palestine when war was declared, and it never let up then right the way through until I came home from Italy, ready for the second front. Of course, by that time I'd left the Right Brigade and I was in 10th Para.
Was it a turning point for you when you viewed how the Allies were tackling what was seen as an evil menace at that point?
I thought I never blamed the airmen. I never blamed them because they was the same as, say, blokes in the Merchant Navy. They're putting their life at risk every time they went up. And they lost a lot of men, 55,000. But I said, and I still say, and I've said it in print and I've said it on broadcast, I'll never forgive the people who ordered those raids. And that goes for all of them. Churchill, Attlee, all of them. Whatever they can say. Because as soon as it came through, after about 2 weeks, and it started sinking in, because between that, they were still carrying on bombing other cities like this. And then, of course, they tried to put the blame on somebody else. We were supposed to be the good guys. We was going to war to rescue Europe from the evil of the Third Reich. And we finished up being worse than they were. I'm not going to say we, because what annoys me is all this was done in our name, and I felt I felt it really whacked me. It really whacked me to think that I belonged to a nation who was responsible for what was going on in that city that night.
Well, so that's about as telling a testimony as you're likely to hear. No doubt there are other ones just as bad, but that's a man who lived through it. Victor Gregg, who I mentioned there earlier, passed away 2021 at the ripe old age of 101, who lived through Dresden. And we're here tonight on this show to remember that day and to talk about it a bit and what it means also in the context of our lives now, because it's literally exactly 80 years ago to the day that bombing raid, and it didn't last just one day, it went on for several days, began. And I've got a whole array of guests and experts. It's a bit like a who's who of people who know a great deal about this topic are here with me tonight. And I mentioned before, over the past few months, we've not done so many guests on the show, but tonight we have a lot. And I'd like to introduce first, because it is ladies first, Monika Schaefer. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you back. How are you? How are you this fine afternoon, I guess, for you over there in Canada?
Thank you so much. I'm well. Thank you for inviting me to this. And just to your preface there, I don't consider myself an expert. However, I would just consider myself a lay person who has looked into these things. And just very briefly, my personal connection, I guess you could say, to the story of Dresden is through my mother's voice that keeps ringing in my ears and in my head. Now, she was not in Dresden, but she was in Germany. She was born in 1928, so she was, in her teens during the war. And what she said, first of all, she did not talk often about the war years when we were growing up, not often at all, but any time that she did talk about the war years, this is what she said: "Why Dresden? Why Dresden? Why Dresden?" And it was with such sadness, just such utter, I don't even find the words for what emotions were coming through her voice when she said, "Why Dresden?" Yeah. And I know you're just introducing everybody, so I'll leave it at that.
Well, you can say a little bit more, Monika. I don't mind. The mic's yours until you feel like a natural pause. You don't have to sort of clear the space. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just thought everybody was going to say hello first, and then we would.
Oh no, that we can wait. We're gentlemen. We can wait. It's fine. and I was completely engrossed in what you were saying. So please carry on if you've got some more in these opening remarks. Yeah.
Yeah, just to continue from what my mother would say, and honestly, for us children who were in such a different world, and by then we were being indoctrinated and, contaminated in our minds from the schooling and the narrative that was being brought to us from everywhere, not just through school, but just through the films and the Hollywood and the TV and everywhere. It was quite a different narrative. So we really were not able to fully understand. However, just that did carry that why Dresden, because then she would follow that with, they all knew, we all knew, and they all knew, and they knew that we knew, and we knew that they knew that there was no military target there in Dresden. And she spoke of Dresden as the most beautiful, absolutely exquisite stunning a cultural city that ever was. It really was like out of a dream, or it like a storybook city. Every building, every corner, everything was decorated. It wasn't just a building for function, but it would be a building for beauty as well. And it was old. There were old, beautiful cathedrals, and it was just nonstop. The whole city was like that. It wasn't just one little corner. A stunning city, and no military targets, and to top it off, filled to bursting with the refugees, and we're talking German refugees, people who were fleeing from points further east. It was 1945. The war had been raging for years, and the Bolshevik army was coming, the Reds, and so they went to Dresden. That they became a hospital city because there were no military targets. And the other thing about it is the German people felt that nobody would ever bomb something this beautiful. Nobody would do that. I mean, they understood full well they're in a war, okay, so there's bombing, and I mean, they had been smashed to bits by then, Germany had been, but nobody would ever bomb such a place of beauty. Why for? And especially they knew it was filled to the hilt with refugees. So my mother spoke of those things more than anything else when she spoke of the war, and that remained with me. And I'll have more to say, but I will pause now and let others.
Oh, that's great. Great introduction. Yeah, thank you, Monika. No, that's. I haven't really looked at the topic for some time, actually, because I was swimming in it for years, and I took a break. Although I was probably mentioning to you the other day, and I mentioned it here on the show, I've recently read Goebbels' diaries, courtesy of the phenomenal book put together by David Irving, which is a real eye-opener, and how he was coping, organising all this, dealing with not just Dresden, but of course all of these sort of bombing situations, which we know were just going on relentlessly towards the tail end of the war. But no, you set the scene well, and the truth of it being such a beautiful city is self-evident from anybody that's seen any of the photographs and images of it, during the 1930s, prior to the devastation that fell upon it. But no, that's great, Monika. It's great to talk to you again and have you here. Okay. Moving on. It's a bit like serving people at a restaurant. Dennis Wise, welcome back to the show. How are you? How's your health? And how are you doing on this fine, well, for me, chilly English evening? How are things for you?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, first of all, and I'm doing okay.
Great.
I'm not exactly running marathons, but
no,
I'm doing okay. So I too, like Monika, don't class myself as an expert. I was more of a messenger during the.
Well, you're the most of you are the experts that I know. Okay.
Well, I was more of a messenger.
Yes, I know.
With
Me too.
Documentaries, yeah. But after I'd done the third documentary, The Secret Masonic Victory of World War II, I then took a different outlook on Dresden and other atrocities, both during and after World War II. I did a little sequence on the Spanish Armada and the subsequent deaths which followed to the British Navy, what was kept at sea and starved to death or were all sick. And that was leaning me towards the fact that Dresden, as eloquently explained by Monika, such a beautiful city, and the questions of a mother of why. And I honestly believe that it was one of those mass sacrifices to their God.
Yeah.
And if people don't realise what I'm talking about the world today is run by occultists, many are Luciferian, and that is their God, and they require sacrifices for certain things, and Dresden, I believe, was one of them.
Well, it's difficult to think of it in any other terms. I mean, because of, as Monika was detailing just then, we know of the excessively large population at the time because of them fleeing away from the Red Army.
Sure.
I mean, I heard someone the other day trying to justify it. It was enough to make you puke. I didn't know what to do.
There was no justification.
No, there isn't. There's none. It's a complete, I think Victor Gregg's testimony is enough. These sorts of justifications come from people born after the event, trying to sort of hold up some historical narrative, which when the more you look at it, the less it holds together. It's just sort of, war propaganda, the whole thing, and it had to be done and this, that, and the other, and it shortened the war, but it didn't. It didn't do anything of the sort. It just basically destroyed and killed. What's the official figure? 25,000 people, supposedly, is what we're supposed to swallow down as being the result of it. It's laughable. I mean, and it's an insult, of course, to the dead, as we well know. But and of course, you've done all this work with all these videos, so you've got an extensive overview, really, of not just that period, but as you were saying, the Masonic influence in it, and no doubt many of the listeners here on Rumble, but maybe the general radio audience are not aware that all the leading protagonists, with the exception of Mr. Hitler, as far as I understand, were Masons. And were thick as thieves in that kind of stuff. And this is not talked about too much, but it's definitely therefore something that needs to be talked about a lot,
And they never mentioned the fact that it was the Germans under Adolf Hitler what destroyed Freemasonry in Germany and every other country that they invaded for a reason. And I believe that they knew the reason, same as I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's good to have you back, Dennis. We've, I've not spoken to you for a little while.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have you back, and it's good to hear your health is okay and that you're not running marathons, which I wouldn't advise you to do even if your health was good. No, I mean, I walk up and down the beach here all the time. I see these people puffing billies, smashing their knees and hips up, and I'm looking at them in amazement thinking, why are you doing this now? It's tough enough when you're young, but no, I've got to run. And yeah, they're all saving up for their knee operations. They'll all be going over to France if they're still doing. They're very cheap over there, I think, knee operations in France, but... No, it's great to have you here, Dennis. Anyway, it's all a little bit... We're just going to go through everybody and then we'll just open it up and we can just start spinning around.
I'm interested to hear what people have to say, yeah.
Yeah, me too. I don't really want to do so much talking. I just want to do a bit of listening tonight. So that's kind of my role. Anyway, coming on to Thomas Anderson, welcome to the show. How are you this fine German evening? Or maybe you're not in Germany, are you? But you're near. You're nearby.
I'm close to, yes.
You're very close.
To everybody. Good evening. Nice to be back here again.
It's nice to have you back, Thomas. Nice to have you back. I guess it would be good to get your overview initially just of this situation, and however you can take as long or as short as you like, really.
Okay. Well, if I may, I would like to start with the actual official situation within Germany, performed and presented by the German government. It's not too long ago, I guess it was around a decade ago, where the German government finally decided that they want to have exact numbers on how many people died that night 80 years ago in Dresden. And they did a research, or let some people do a research for several years. And what came out is the today official number. And when I remember it right, the official number is something like 16 to 20,000 people who died that night in Dresden.
Right.
So some of you may wonder, well, 16,000, that's not too many. They also presented the number of people who were living in Dresden before that night on pages like Wikipedia, for example, and the number there presented is around 350,000. And the number on Wikipedia, so they get their statistics correct, after that incident was only around 20,000 less. So the statistics on the official side are all very clear and all very correct. However, they are not true. When you go and do a Google research on very simple numbers, you find other pages that point out that the number of inhabitants in Dresden was about 600 to 700,000 those days. And so the difference between reality and the official statement is quite big. I also, as the others, would not say that I'm an expert, but I had the privilege and still have the honor to know a lady who was born in Dresden before the war began, and surprisingly, her father was in an official position within the local city government and organization. He was responsible for the housing of the refugees, as far as I remember her statements. So it was a kind of stressy job in those days, because we already heard from Monika, yes, the city was full of refugees. It was the central hub for all refugees who came from the eastern provinces and searched for some help, for clinics, for medical help, for food, for some warm clothes, anything. They all came with horse-drawn carriages, that they came by foot, millions of them. And the official number, of course, I cannot present. I can only present what I heard from this lady, with her father being in that position in the city those days. Her father told her that he estimates, because he was responsible for the housing and didn't find it for so many people, he estimates that there was an absolute minimum of 1.5 million refugees in Dresden in that night. He thinks it may have been even more, so around 1.5 to 2 million refugees only. On top of these 1.5 million, there come, of course, the normal inhabitants of the city. So we are already talking about minimum 2 million people, perhaps 2.5 million people being in Dresden that night. And so how can the German government come to a number like 16,000, and what they did is quite special. They said, we can only count those people being dead whom we can identify 100% sure. So everyone who was not burned to ashes cannot be identified and was not counted. And as we already heard from the statement from that British soldier, the situation in Dresden was really like a furnace. We are talking about temperatures around much more than 1,000 degrees, where absolutely nothing will survive, and absolutely nothing will be there of a human being, of a human flesh body. It will burn literally to ashes and to dust, and then disappear with the next wind. So that official statistics of the German government is a crime, a historical crime,
yes,
and treason to the German people. And I tend to believe that privately made statement of a very honest and very decent person who was only talking about what her dad told her when all that thing was over. She was lucky and was not in town, but next to town, about 10 kilometers away, and not only what she was able to see at that night, because of course Dresden was on fire, with high flames lighting up the sky for many kilometers away, and I do not even dare to think or try to think, to imagine what the people there had to go through. No,
it's quite a thing. I was talking about a little anecdote that came to me. It's not to do with Dresden, but it is to do with events in the war. When over the summer, I had to visit my wife in hospital for quite a while. She's back home now, but there was a lady that came into a bed nearby. I didn't know anything about her. She was not in a good way. She was elderly, and she had a big sort of bruised arm. She'd fallen over. The hospitals are full of elderly people that fall over. So if you don't fall over, everyone, at any stage, but particularly when you get old, it's not good. And she was a bit incoherent for the first day and a half. And then at the weekend, her son arrived, and I got talking to him, and he was telling me about his mum, and it was quite an amusing but kind of dramatic story all at the same time, and it's one of these gluing stories. And she was from Hamburg. I said, oh, and yeah, so she was from Hamburg, and she would have been, at the time of the tail end of the war, she would have been in her teens, about 17 or 18 years of age. She'd just had her 100th birthday. She'd just been 100. She'd born about 1924 or something like that, 25. So she'd just had her 100th birthday, and she was after she'd come out of the sort of drug-induced pain period, she was quite lucid. Great. Her English was fantastic, of course, as is yours. I'm not being silly about it. It's just the case. And she was great. She was yakking away. And I said, your mum's really recovered well. Yeah. So, and he tells me this story about it. And he said, yeah, he said, she's lived there for a long time. They've been very active. I said, is her husband still alive? You know, your dad? He said, no, he died a few years ago. And the story is that she was in Hamburg, and got moved out, but it was a sort of a close-run thing at the time. But her husband was in the RAF at that time, in bombers, bombing Hamburg. And I couldn't believe it when he told me this. I said, really? I said, so this is a really fiery wartime romance. First of all, your dad tries to bomb your mum. He said, yes. He's smiling as he's telling me this. And then he ends up meeting her and he married her. He said, yeah. So I just thought I would pass that on just to lighten the mood a little bit. You know, it's not that this justifies any of this sort of stuff, but there's these strange little quirky stories, and that was definitely one. And she was fighting fit. She's probably about 102 by now. So it was, you know, it's just a wonderful little tale to hear. And they'd travelled all around the world and done things and had a very active life. So, you know, out of the ashes comes some good things, but very few, because there's such a lot of ashes, as you've just been talking about, that are connected, obviously, with not just Dresden, but the whole of that campaign towards the end of the war. So, or during the war, you know, once they couldn't stop bombing like mad, which is basically, you know, a main theme of what occurred there during the conflict. So, no, it's great to have you back as well, Thomas. It's really good. I know it's kind of a kind of cozy space tonight. We've got lots of people in here. I'm going to go over to one of the regular crew, Eric. How are you this fine Thursday evening? How are things with you?
Oh, good evening. I'm very moved, actually, by what your guests have actually said. And I also am no expert on Dresden. But the observation I've made is that I'm not sure about Thomas, but I know that yourself, Paul, myself, Dennis, and Monica, we are possibly the last direct links to World War II, because we were born after the war, but our parents were involved. Or maybe with Thomas and Patrick, your grandparents were involved. And with me, my father, he was a very reluctant conscript, because he used to read to his blind father before World War II, and he knew that we was being told a pack of lies. And he was conscripted into the British forces very reluctantly. He didn't want to go. And he saw action in Malta, invasion of Sicily, Italy, Sicily, and D-Day. And he had he was actually had shell shock that was not actually they just left it. So he had and because he had shell shock, he relived the war every day of his life. So from a very early age, I had World War II every day. So I could sort of repeat it. It's sort of stuck in my memory. It affected me because some of the things he told me, and I'm not blaming my dad, because my dad and I were like twins. We were very close. But I heard things when I was young that I probably shouldn't have heard, of the real horrors of the battlefield. So it gave me a possibly more of an insight into what actually went on. But with Dresden, I worked with a navigator who was on Lancaster's, who was on the Dresden raid. And I can explain this later, but what he told me was absolutely horrific. And also both my father and my uncle saw flamethrowers in use, and they said the people that used these flamethrowers must have been psychopaths, and they saw the result of it. I won't go into that because I find it a little bit moving, because it hell, absolute hell. And I think that war on the battlefield is really a psychopath's playground. That's basically what you really call it. But most of the psychopaths don't see it at first hand. They sit behind desks and see it. But I'll reserve, what I have to say for a little bit later, because I'm sure that Monika and everybody else has got a heck of a lot to say. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. And although he's not actually on the screen, he is out there. Patrick, welcome to the show. How are you in cheesy Wisconsin? How are things for you this fine afternoon, I'm assuming?
Oh, thank you. It's quite cold here, but it's getting warmer. It's not too bad. Yeah, this topic is very interesting. I'm in the middle of reading David Irving's book, The Destruction of Dresden, the updated version you can get on irvingbooks.com, the newest version that's been updated since he originally wrote it. And I think it was published in 1963. Quite telling of the planning of it and the tactics that they used with the different wings of airplanes that would go in and mark the spot where they were going to bomb, and then the rest of the bombers would have radar and that sort of thing that could see where those markers were, and then they could target. So they planned this out, and I didn't know that this took place after the Yalta Conference. So they had communications going between the Soviets, who were attacking from the east and driving people to the west. And that's why, like Monika was saying about the refugees fleeing, they fled from the Soviets across the Oder River near there. They were just on the east side, getting into the west side, and the people that didn't flee, they were getting terrible things done to them. And then top it off with the tragedy that took place. And I think Dresden was chosen, and I think they had a goal to get rid of it from the beginning, because the history there goes back quite a ways. And I think the people involved in that had, like was being said earlier, there's a secret group of people that plan these things, and Dresden was kind of a heart of the opposition to that. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're pretty close to it. I think it symbolized a lot of the finer qualities of German living. Obviously, the architecture we're aware of. And you can find these images of Dresden pre-bombing, as it were. So I guess it kind of symbolized the finest of architectural performance from the Germans in terms of the beauty of it as a city.
I would point something else out, that it was also kind of the meeting point of Protestant and Catholic harmony, if you could call it that. But it was definitely a place where those two groups lived in peace and kind of tranquility in a way. And the fact that it wasn't a military target, it was a place of culture. It was the capital of Saxony, which is the state that Dresden is the capital of.
Yeah.
So it's quite telling the history, a little bit more into the history of that, going back hundreds of years and quite fascinating stuff when you learn about it. And the Holy Roman Empire, the history to do with that, the seat of the elector, who would elect the emperor at the time when they had one. So quite fascinating stuff, and very tragic day.
Or days, in fact, because obviously,
Days,
it was days, wasn't it?
And it led up to Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of Lent. So it would have been a carnival atmosphere somewhat, I think, in that city because of that. Yeah. And Fat Tuesday, we have that here in New Orleans. It's famous for the carnival that they have, and I'm sure other places that are European ancestry.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, there's a guy. Who's the guy? The guy that Churchill called the Prof. A guy called Prof. Lindemann, and he was, as far as I understand, a key architect in making these decisions about bombing. And this is a psychopathic mindset. There's no two ways about it, because they targeted areas of the major cities based on the density of housing. The idea was to find those parts of the city that had the highest population density per square meter, square yard, as we would say over here, and to focus in on those to actually get, what was Lindemann's words, the highest, yield of blood per square yard. Yeah. Literally, yeah. That's the sort of mentality.
He would always overestimate the number of deaths too, but at the same time, he was the driving force behind the area bombing of the residential places to terrorize them. They wanted to demoralize the enemy, and they figured that would be the most effective way to do it and demand the most resources, because you'll have of the number of homeless as a consequence. Yeah,
the burden that would actually put on the rest of the logistics afterwards. Yeah. I mean, of course, we're talking about this, but in World War I, as far as I'm aware, there weren't any civilian bombing runs. There may have been some. Maybe they hadn't designed the bombing technology to their satisfaction, had to use the bombers to bomb troops or whatever. So it's, although war is a ridiculous thing, you could say, well, at least World War I was infantrymen against infantrymen, mad and stupid and pointless and senseless and completely avoidable, though it obviously wasn't, because we weren't able to avoid it. But this is the thing that makes this so wretched, is this intentional targeting of civilians. It's and I've mentioned it before, there's a cathedral over here at Ely Cathedral. We may have mentioned this only a couple of weeks ago, but it's definitely appropriate right now in this show. They did some repair work on it a few years ago, and they were taking some walls down, and they discovered the last time there'd been repair work was like 1943 in Ely Cathedral. And they'd taken this plaster off, and they found all this graffiti that had been put up there by the workmen of the time, and it was scathing towards the leadership of this country because of these bombing runs. And someone had drawn a bomber bombing a mother and child, supposedly in Germany, at a bus stop, with some, I can't remember what the remark was underneath, but there is a lot of this. It's this way in which people are compelled and end up doing the most horrific things because I guess they get a bullet in the head or think they're going to get one, or whatever the punishment was going to be. I know that when there are anecdotes of when they were actually planning out these bombing runs, the pilots over here, there are often a lot of mutterings at the back of the room saying, one of them was, "Oh, women and children first again, is it?" Sarcastically, that they were appalled in a way by what they were being ordered to do. And everybody's passing the buck, but it comes from the highest level. And of course, after the war, Churchill and that lot were all, saying, "Oh, it's Bomber Command," and Bomber Command were going, "No, we were, ordered to do this." And you've got to go up the line to find out where it's all going to come from. And as we've also, Churchill's first day behind his desk, the very first thing he did within a matter of hours was order a bombing run on Germany to get it going as quickly as he possibly could, doing everything he could to provoke the Luftwaffe to bomb London, which, of course, in due course, it had to, I guess, and did, giving them further justification for unleashing as many bombers as they could. And the tail end of it, symbolically and actually, of course, is Dresden. It's the one that stands out more, even though no doubt Hamburg and Berlin got pummeled just as bad. But there's something about, in Dresden, it kind of sums the whole thing up. It's trying to just literally destroy the culture and the people, in the most horrific way.
I believe it was May 10th, 1941, when they bombed Freiburg, Germany, in the south, just across from Basel, Switzerland.
Yeah.
And that was the day that Churchill took power. So, and it's kind of a mystery how that took place, but yeah.
Well, it was good to hear Victor Gregg have a go at him at the end of that little testimony he gave right at the beginning of the show. And I'm sure he's not alone in that. And of course, we still have to swallow down hook, line and sinker, greatest Britain that ever lived. No, I don't think so. Anybody that even casually looks into it. But you still get historians to this day defending it all. I came across one last week. Maleficus Scott sent me this clip, and I just didn't know what to really think of the guy. I mean, it was just like propaganda 101, court historian 2025 style, trying to justify this stuff. There's a war on and all this. No. It's appalling. It's appalling. We're going to run out of adjectives to describe it. But anyway, Patrick, it's good to, obviously we're not speaking as frequently as we usually would. We've got all these wonderful voices and everybody here around the microphone. Paul, you've arrived. Anything you would like to say, Paul? No, he's just listening. That's okay. So that's Paul. He might step in at some point. That's Paul. The show's going out all over the place, and it's picked up and going over to Global Voice Network, which is Paul's situation as well. So thanks for that, Paul. So we're going out to quite a crowd. And here we are, as I said, I'm just repeating again, it's February the 13th, 2025, and 80 years ago today, in fact, imminently. As Monica, you were saying something just in the pre-show about the timing. Did you want to comment a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. It is now about 13 minutes away from, it would be 10 o'clock in the evening, Germany time, on the 13th of February, that the bombing began. So it was dark out, and the people were in the streets because, like Patrick alluded to, it was Fasching Dienstag. So the Tuesday, it would be like the Mardi Gras in United States, and especially in Louisiana. I think they really do a big thing there with Mardi Gras. And in Germany, that was a big party. And the people were feeling rather celebratory. They felt very safe being in Dresden. It had not been targeted throughout the years of the war. And like I had mentioned earlier, it was basically, it had turned into a hospital city filled with refugees and no military target. And they felt safe. They were out reveling. So another aspect to this is that would be, maximum kill for these bombings to start in the midst of the good cheer, you could say. And I mean, it's as much as you could be in good cheer in years into the war, yep, when Germany was not doing well. However, we know that as human beings, we do try to, not be dismal and sad all the time. We will get together and we will sing and play even amidst the most terrible circumstances. So there they were out in the streets celebrating Fasching, and that's when it began. So that literally is in a few minutes, 80 years ago, that all began, those horrors. And like you had also mentioned, it went on then for a few days, or, they really timed everything perfectly for maximum damage. They started out with these explosive bombs to blow the roofs off, and then they came in with the incendiary bombs to start the firestorm. And my goodness, and some of the others on this panel have already talked about that, the extreme high winds, pulling people into the inferno and pulling everything into the inferno was, and then also sucking the oxygen out of the, what do you call it, the cellars. Like if people went down into their basements or the bomb shelters to seek refuge, many of them died from asphyxiation or from just pure heat. And but the oxygen literally was sucked out, and because of this firestorm that happened. And then just to fast forward the way this all unfolded, I don't know how many hours it was, but then it would have been the next day, I think, after so things were quiet again, and people were coming in from the surrounding villages to help. So the rescue, the ambulances, the people helping. And that's when the bombers came with another wave to strafe them, to kill them. It was pure and simple, to kill as many people as they could. So, I mean, Churchill is infamous for even saying before this began in Dresden, don't give me suggestions of how to target, how to find a military target. Just give me suggestions how we can baste or roast. I don't know the word he used, but at some point the word baste came into this conversation. How we can baste 600,000 Germans. That came out of Churchill's mouth at some meeting or other. I think somebody else on this panel might know the specifics of it. And, that was the intention. It was clearly intention. And then, like one of the others have mentioned, it did not stop with Dresden. And Dresden wasn't the first either. It started, I think, Patrick, you mentioned 1941, just after Churchill came to power, with the bombing of cities and towns. And I think any city or town in Germany with a population over a certain amount got targeted. But on February 16th, literally just a few days after Dresden, they obliterated a little town called Pforzheim, and half of the population died in that. And it was about 63,000 inhabitants lived there. And it was known for producing crockery and dinnerware. And half of the people there died. There were no military targets there either. So that was just one example. They went on and on and on until the very end of the war, to continue to bomb towns and villages, to kill as many Germans as possible. And yes, to demoralize the enemy, as somebody mentioned, but also literally to kill as many Germans as possible. I mean, we are all familiar with the book by Theodor Kaufmann that I think was published in 1941. And the title of that was Germany Must Perish, and how he outlined how to do that is to sterilize all the men from, 16 to 80 or something like that, hire 20,000 surgeons to do that, and voila, no more Germans, because Germans are just inherently evil. I mean, this is the extent of the brain contamination. I don't like to use the word brainwashing because it sounds too clean, but, the contamination of people's minds, so much hatred towards the Germans, the incitement of hatred. Nowadays, if we are speaking too many facts, they call us the haters. But really, it is the hatred against the German people that had been going on for a long, long time, and then really got amplified during the war. And then after World War II, who was that? Sefton Dalmer, the
Yes.
black propaganda. Yeah, there was that famous quote that he did, we're only just beginning now with our atrocity propaganda. And he basically admitted that it was all lies, because in the end of that quote, he said, it's like an English lawn, one moment of neglect, and those pesky weeds of historical truth come up, something like that. I don't have it in front of me, but
That's good enough. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
The gist of it, isn't it? And
Yes.
just to bring it to the current time, and this thing that I just mentioned about brain contamination or indoctrination or re-education, they Umerziehung in German, to re-educate, but that I have big air quotes around that. So we think of George Orwell style, to erase the facts and replace the facts with this new narrative. So now, it's not that many years ago, I remember seeing a video at one of these, the commemorations that happens on the Saturday nearest to this date, this anniversary in Dresden. There were young German women, and they were, blonde, beautiful German women, but they had painted on their chests, "Do it again, Bomber Harris." And it's just, that
Oh, yeah.
would be the epitome of the tragedy of the war that continues to this day in the form of the psychological warfare, the psychological aspect of it, this indoctrination and programming of the minds, that you have these young German women painting that on their chests, "Do it again, Bomber Harris." Now, if people don't know who Bomber Harris was, maybe somebody else can explain, but wasn't he the head commander of the bombers?
He was.
Yeah, Sir Arthur Harris. David Irving interviewed him in 1961 for his book Destruction of Dresden. Yeah, he was the main commander of the bombers, but he was not the one who ultimately gave the orders of where to bomb.
Correct. Right. No, but they're very symbolic, isn't it? That these Germans have become basically, self-hating, self-loathing because of this guilt cult that they carry. It is changing. There are many, many Germans who are becoming aware and conscious of the fact that there has been a grand deception, grand as in large, not as in good, as the word grand being used in a terrible sense there. But and earlier we talked about the numbers, the official numbers that are now given, and I was horrified to see that they even went down from the quote unquote official number of 25,000 to 16,000 or 16 to 20,000, and how they came up with those numbers. Yeah, somebody has to be very identifiable, and how many of those who were completely turned into ash could ever be identified. Not to mention, and earlier I had thought about doing a reading out of this excellent book. I'm not going to do a reading out of the book, The Myth of German Villainy. We'll just, because we're talking about all these things, and describe it. But there is an excellent few pages in this book, which I think, if people haven't read anything about, that era, this would be a one-stop shop, if you like, to dispel this notion of German villainy. So it is called The Myth of German Villainy by Benton Bradbury. But anyway, in this section that I had kind of earmarked, it talks about the pyres, the fires, that to deal with the bodies, or what was left of the bodies, those who had not been utterly, completely turned to ash already by the firestorm in Dresden. But there were many, 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 many dead, and they had to deal with that. And so they just created pyres and lined these with railway ties and lit them on fire, and had these pyres going for day and night for days and days and days. It took a long time. And I think that some of the photographs of some of those ended up in, the propaganda to put guilt on the Germans about that other thing that we're not allowed to talk about, but there are laws against not believing in the Holocaust. That there are laws in many countries that we are not allowed to talk about that. So anyway, I'm just saying that there are some of the tools they used to indoctrinate people are photographs, and some of those photographs, I dare say, came from Dresden and were the photographs of German bodies.
I think there's no doubt about that, Monica. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. I mean, we did a show here on whenever it was in January, where we did a show about how are we supposed to talk about a historical event that we're not allowed to talk about. So we can't talk about it, but we can talk about why we can't talk about it. And it's a bit coy and wet. And, the thing is, though, that anybody that's looked into some of these books understands fully what you're talking about, as we all do here. It's just that there's still this situation where so many people are unaware that there is even an alternative take on it. Although that situation, as you said, is improving all the time. By improving, I simply mean that the awareness is building up. Anyway, I think We're just at the end of the first hour, and to lighten the mood a little bit, and we're going to carry on. I'm particularly interested in following through this theme with this sort of projection of guilt on people, because it's been amplified, obviously, very much on the German people to this day. But I think we're also aware that the same sort of psychological techniques are being rolled out for the whole of, let's call it Western Christendom, whatever you want to call it, the European people worldwide. Of course, the Germans have taken the brunt of that and are still doing so today. And I think, the post-war discussion is vital, because we're involved in what is looking like a slightly different but also an equally sort of hellish sort of situation at the moment that's building up around us. Anyway, it's the end of the first hour. I'm going to play a song now from Charlie and his orchestra. And if you don't know who Charlie and his orchestra were, you need to. Last week we played a song from 1921. Well, this is not as old as that. I don't know. I can't give you the exact date, but I'm assuming early 1940s. Charlie and his orchestra were a German jazz band, and they're very good, if you like that sort of thing, and I do. This is called, and you'll have to guess who it's about, The Man with the Big Cigar. It's jolly good, and we'll be back with everyone after this wonderful little tune.
Whose greatest friend is the USSR. He's known around from near and far. That actor man with the big cigar. He puffs away every night and day with a twinkle in his eye. And all the while, behind that smile lurks many an untold lie. Down Whitehall Way, you'll see his car. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, the friend of the USSR. V stands for vanquish. It's the slogan of his land. And he'll fight until it's finished, and there's no one left to stand. He'll keep the red flag flying, though hammered black and blue. For he's getting more than he bargained for, that fat friend of the Jew. So keep your chins up, one and all, and remember what I say. If Britons were to Britain true, they'd send that man away. Who is that man with the big cigar? He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, that man with the big cigar.
Attention all listeners, are you seeking uninterrupted access to WBN 324 Talk Radio despite incoming censorship hurdles? Well, it's a breeze. Just grab and download Opera Browser, then type in WBN324.zil. And stay tuned for unfiltered discussions around the clock. That's WBN324.zil.
The views, opinions and content of the show hosts and their guests appearing on the World Broadcasting Network are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of its owners, partners and other hosts or this network. Thank you for listening to WBN 324 Talk Radio.
And welcome back to Hour 2. We are talking about, or we have been talking about during the first hour, we've got a good selection of high-quality guests here today. It's a really interesting sort of arrangement of people. We've been talking about Dresden, and we were talking in the first hour really about describing the events of it. It is the 80th anniversary of Dresden, literally right now. Today, this very hour is when it started. And we have Monika Schaefer and Dennis Wise and Eric von Essex, and Patrick is here. I'm here, of course, and Thomas Anderson is here with us, and we've just been discussing the last bit, the projection of guilt on the German people, and I wouldn't mind following through with that. I was just wondering, Thomas, what your views were about that, the current situation in Germany, particularly, I guess, with regards to, is there a general feeling about Dresden, or is it like it is over here? It's a kind of slightly hidden topic.
I think let's say it is not talked about in general public because it's something very horrific, but of course it was justified because Germans did so many bad things, and so nobody's really talking about it. No. And the thing that you were mentioning just then, Monika, before we went to the break, this thing about these women, Bomber Harris do it again. I mean, is this not a sign of the modern madness, the sort of brain madness that's gone everywhere?
Yeah, if I may comment on that further, it is the madness. And just a story of when Alfred was at one of those commemorations in Dresden a few years ago, and after he and his friends did their ceremony and their speeches or whatever they were doing, they went to the official ceremony. I guess there was then an official ceremony, and that was where he heard them say, well, yes, 25,000 Germans died in the Dresden attacks. And then in the next breath, this official said, oh, just pardon me, ignore that phone in the background. But anyway, the official said, oh, and the next day, the Nazis rounded up the rest of the Jews in Dresden to send them to their, the concentration camps. So in other words, the Germans had nothing better to do than to round up the Jews who were still in Dresden after Dresden had been bombed to smithereens like we have been describing in the first hour. Mm-hmm. So again, combining this really low figure that is nowhere near, by orders of magnitude, nowhere near the actual number who very likely died, and we'll never know exactly how many. And combine that with this thing about another, German guilt. So, oh well, I guess they had it coming to them, so it really is unspeakable, the evil of that they cannot, that itself is a crime. And I think you said that earlier, Paul, that this official lie is a crime in and of itself. And the Germans can never grieve their losses because they have to be guilty forever. And secondly, they cannot even know or acknowledge or understand the actual extent of what was done to them. So it's like a double, triple, quadruple crime against the Germans. Over to you.
It is. And, the book you mentioned as well, the one by Benton Bradbury, The Myth of German Villainy, if there's anybody out there that's not familiar with this or is slightly surprised by what we're talking about or feels that there can't be too much to it, it's probably, I think it's the best primer There are other books which go into it in greater detail, and they are very valuable, and many of us here have read those things, and that's how we've gained the knowledge that we've got, or the understanding that we have. But Bradbury's book is for a neophyte or a newbie, whatever term you want to use, somebody new into this arena that wants to get to the bottom of it, or senses that there is something to get to the bottom of, and there most definitely is. It's a wonderful introduction. He takes people through the whole of the sort of mismatch of perceptions with regards to Germany. And, you know, it's got to be, it doesn't have to be borne in mind, but I'm going to mention it here. Prior to 1914, England and Germany had never had a war. In fact, they'd basically been allies most of the time. And the whole of that century, of course, when you now stand back and we can see it through a different lens from a greater distance, it's got a wholly different perspective from the one that must have been existing at the time when it was actually happening. I keep thinking about this all the time with regards to history. I mean, it's almost as if your view of it changes each time you bolt on or tunnel into the information a little bit further. You get a slightly different perspective. And there's a great biography of Napoleon. It's vast. It's by Sir Walter Scott. I was thinking of one day narrating it as an audiobook, but it's 2,800 pages long and would probably last about 90 hours. But at the very beginning of the book, he talks about the challenge of studying history, or the historical writer, saying that when a thing is going on around you at the time, it's almost impossible to know fully exactly what it is that's going on, particularly when it's a hellish event or a turbulent event or something like this. You can't make sense of it. You've just got to get through it. But then it is the challenge of the historian or the researcher to get to the bottom of this and to build up the perspective to understand it more fully and why it was taking place and the way it was. And as I'd mentioned before, Irving's book on Goebbels was a massive eye-opener for me. It gave me a wholly new additional perspective on the whole operations, really obviously from the German side, based on these 75,000 pages of diaries that Goebbels had written. So Irving has done the most immense favour to so many people, and you know this because he's pilloried. Even now, even to this day, that it's used by established historians as kind of shorthand for something that's not right, that there's something that he's gone off the rails. But of course he hasn't. He's more on the rails than just about any other historian that we know of. And his comprehensive understanding of that period of history, certainly from an English perspective, he's in a league of one. Really, with the amount of work and everything, it's this detail that builds it up. But Dennis, I wanted to ask you, really just following on with this line. Here we are in this post-war period. Your videos have covered more than just the conflict of World War II, and obviously there's Adolf Hitler, the greatest story never told, which gives us the run-up to that. But this sort of psychological warfare that we are in right now, this war, what's your kind of take on that? What are your sort of current thoughts with regards to this ongoing theme, this challenge in our lives?
Well, can I just say before I pick that up, that I'm pretty sure, I may be wrong, but somebody might correct me or not, but once the bombing of the first raids was over and people was coming out to the shelters, didn't the Americans bring the airplanes in with the machine guns?
Yes.
To target civilians?
They did.
The next day, yeah. So again, it's proof of wanting the blood and the killing as many civilians as possible. But yeah, as far as today, I think it's quite plain for everybody, especially in Europe, what the plan is, and that is basically to outbreed us. Us being whites, mainly Christian nations. This is a Holocaust in a different evil way, I believe. When a country like, say, the UK does the maximum to prevent all these people coming in, and the minimum to kick even those who were found to be criminals out, that only goes to show that the intention really is to get in. They haven't reached the full quota yet to outbreed us.
No. And there's a similar situation in Germany, I understand, Europe, Thomas. Yeah, Thomas, is there a similar sort of situation in Germany? I mean, I know there is, but I'm just feeding you a line. Because it's,
Well, I would like to add something for those listeners who might be not familiar with what Monika and Paul were talking about. This topic we are not allowed to talk about. There is, perhaps you may remember, there was a very famous violin player called Menuhin.
Yehudi
Menuhin.
Yeah,
Yehudi Menuhin. And his son, Gérard Menuhin, lives in Switzerland, and he wrote a book. In German, the title is, let me tell you, Wahrheit sagen, Teufel jagen. In English, I guess it was Tell the Truth and Chase the Devil.
Yeah.
And I would really strongly recommend for everybody who does not understand the topic to read this book, because it's basically everything in there. And coming to let's say the overall picture. I know that there's not only the historical topic of what Germany did to any other people were, or what other people did to Germany. Well, that's one point, but putting this together in a wider historical framework was the topic of my book, and perhaps it might be interesting for other people too, because I researched all this because I had the question in my head: why is there always an ongoing fight between Germans and Jews? When you go back in history, it's always Germans and Jews again and again and again and again, and nobody really understands why. And I started my research with a lot of ancestry research, going back really far back, and that led me finally having a family tree going back to Adam and Eve. That sounds ridiculous, but I can prove it, and anybody who will.
Well, that's how we first met. Don't you remember?
Yeah.
You were showing me that tree, and I remember speaking to other people. I said, I've just spoken to someone, and you never guess what I saw. I was dazzled by it. It was absolutely amazing. Yeah, you might want to say a little bit about that, because it's amazing bit of work you did.
That was the start of the research, and it, of course at the beginning I was even not happy about it, because it's somehow ridiculed all my work, I thought, because going back to Adam and Eve, that's ridiculous. Nobody can do that, and then I checked all and every piece of data I had in this tree again and again with multiple number of resources, and I found out, according to the actual standard of historical research, it is true, so far as I can say. And let's take this as the basic so-called fact. This led me to the other things and to the other stories that may be the true explanation for why it is always about Germans and Jews, why there is an ongoing fight, not since 100 years, but since the beginning, since ongoing for more than many thousand years. Of course, at the beginning, those were not called Germans, but they had a different name, and I then found out. That's all in my book. I don't want to talk about this here again, and I don't want to repeat everything, but anybody who is interested in what is the overall picture, where did this start, why did this start, when did this start, by whom was it started, then he should read my book. When I go back to the let's say the Dresden time, and we find the Germans there. When we go back in history, we come to German tribes which go back, let's say, a few hundred years ago, and then we come to the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire of German nation, which it was called, which is not taught anymore in school today. And when we go back through these Roman times, we find the Germans descend from the Assyrians, and the Assyrians descend from the Cainites, and the Cainites descend, of course, from Cain. Cain and Abel, I'm sure everybody remembers that. And the opposite side was always, and since then, the descendants or the ascendants of today's Jewish people. They had a special order. They have an ongoing fight against every German, which was in the Bible called Amalek, the Amalekites. And in the Bible it is said, we have an ongoing fight to wipe out Amalek from the surface of the earth, from generation to generation until it's done. And what we see now here is exactly this. It's the end fight. They want to get rid of us. And I think
it's very interesting what you say, but I'm going to jump in here, right? Because we're going to have to do another. I'll let you get. We're going to have to do a show where we address that, because I don't agree with you.
I know that you don't agree with me in detail. I know that you don't agree with me in detail. You're talking about different names like the Israeli tribes, etc., etc. But that's not the point. I guess we can agree on the fact that there are two opposite sides fighting against each other for hundreds and thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Reasons.
Yeah.
Which they do not know anymore today. Only a very few people, a very small circle of people still knows what this is for, and they do everything to keep it on going. But I guess when more people would be aware of what this all is about, this stupidity and this nonsense to fight for death, for serving someone completely else. We could end this tomorrow. There's no reason for it.
Mm-hmm. It's an extremely... I think about sort of entrenched behaviour within races and tribes, and we've all got it. We're like, it's that thing like with fish. You're born in, they're in water. Do you know it? No. There's lots of things that I realised today I was completely unconscious about 2 or 3 years ago. And I suspect that process is never going to end. You become aware of a thing that's been so obvious and staring you in the face, but you never saw it before. The thing about sort of... I remember when I was young, I used to think, well, we can just change our behaviour and everything, can't we? But the longer you live, you begin to see how difficult that is, and how it hasn't happened very much, if at all. So people are kind of born into sort of like tram lines a lot of the time. And I guess this is part of the individual struggle, in a way, to see it more clearly. I think... But we're going to have to do a show on this, because it's a topic recently which has come up in some other conversations I've been having elsewhere. And it's kind of... I've been getting all my... books out. I've got about 18 inches of books next to my bed. I've got so many I could probably make a little settee out of them. There's that many, and I'm jumping around. I was talking to Monika earlier. She was saying yesterday or something, she's running out of bookmarks because you got all these books all over the place, and I'm exactly the same. Going, now where is it, that bit, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm suddenly faced with the sort of archivist problem of going, well, I know all the information's there, but I can't find it anymore. So it's that kind of stuff. But I think
Monika has a comment that she'd like to make about what Thomas just said.
Yeah, please. Yeah, just Monika, just blurt out. Just step in and shout. Yeah, shout. Go on. Just tell me to shut up. It's great. You can do that. Your permission.
No.
Go on.
Thank you. It's just an anecdote. Thanks, Thomas. That was very interesting. And you should tell us the title of your book. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but just before you do that, the book by Yehudi Menuhin, the German title is better than the English title. At least I had a conversation with my brother Alfred about that, because in German it's Wahrheit sagen, Teufel jagen, which is chase, and you did say that it's tell the truth and chase the devil. That is actually better. The actual title is Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil. And why is chase the devil better? Because the devil feels no shame. The devil cannot be shamed because the devil does not feel shame. So that is
very
actually
true. Yep.
Yeah, it is. And then I'll just give you a little tiny prison story. When I was in jail in 2018 in Germany.
What was this?
It has.
You're a jailbird, Monika. What? I know you are. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Please tell us.
So it was quite maybe a month or 6 weeks in. and went to the church service. I had just been given permission for the church service, and the timing was lucky on that, because I witnessed the most beautiful, beautiful concert, and it made me just weep because it was so moving. But it was a young man who was singing, Handel and Bach, and a pianist, a young woman accompanying. And then there was another woman who was basically their handler, I guess, brought them into the prison. And it was the Yehudi Menuhin Foundation who sponsored these jail visits of, musicians to go maybe twice a year into the jail for the benefit of all the people who were in there. And anyway, afterwards, there were a few moments to chat. So I was chatting with this woman who was there, who came along, who brought these young people in. So their handler, I guess you could say. And it was announced that it was the Yehudi Menuhin Foundation that sponsored this. And so, that's wonderful. And I just said to her, I'm very familiar with the name Yehudi Menuhin. Just on the side, I mentioned that I played violin myself. So among violin players, that's a very well-known name. And I really appreciated that they were doing this, bringing musicians into the prison. And then I said, and she was very interested. She really liked this. And she was paying close attention to what I was saying and really engaging with me, until I told her that I'm also very familiar with Yehudi Menuhin's son, Gerard Menuhin, because he wrote a very good book. And then I told her the name of the book. And we were speaking in German, so I told her the name of the book in German. And at that moment, it's like I became invisible. And
Did you?
Her eyes I became completely invisible, and she kind of just focused now on somebody next to me or beside her or whatever. And that was it. The conversation between us was over. I guess maybe she knew of that book. Maybe she knew that the rest of the family of the Menuhin family, they had distanced themselves from Gerard Menuhin.
It's called dynamic silence.
Yes.
It is.
So that was just what I wanted to add, my little anecdotes.
I think Yehudi, I don't know if
Shaming
it's
the
in that
devil.
book. Yeah, I've not read the book, although Maleficus has just put a link to it in the Rumble chat. So anybody listening, if you want to get hold of a copy of that book, there's a link to a freebie PDF version, which I'll be grabbing as well, although I might have a copy somewhere. But I read, maybe it's in this book, I don't know. Maybe he mentions it about his father, Yehudi. As far as I'm aware, he never, ever addressed this issue of this great event that you are supposed to be cursed with. And the implication was that he never subscribed to it. He was, I'm assuming, too intelligent to actually swallow it down and had integrity or whatever, and never actually came out and supported what we would call a certain sort of narrative. It's difficult to know exactly how to express it. I don't know what sentences I'm supposed to use.
Yeah. I think how his questioning, phase in his life came about is that it was his father or his grandfather who had just died? No, his grandfather, of course. It was, and then they were going through the attic, just papers and this and that. And he was finding all these things. And Gerard Menuhin had spent at least part of his growing up years in Germany, going to school with German children. And he couldn't understand that these very nice German children that he played with and associated with, that this was the same race of people who supposedly did this evil deed. It did not compute for him. He couldn't understand. So then when he found his grandfather's papers and newspaper clippings and this and that, and I'd have to reread the book now to get the details of that, but then things really started to open up in his head, and he goes, "Oh, I must look into this more. What was going on there?" And that's when he started to really go take the deep dive and do the research, and then that book came out of it. So that's just what I recall right now. But I did buy multiple copies of the book at the time and was giving them out like almost like candy to people that I just thought, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. So anyway, yeah, it's a good recommendation. Back to you.
Yeah, well, I just saw your comment as well. Coming back to you, Thomas, the title of your book in both English and German. The title of your book.
Yes.
What is it?
Yes, of course. I would love to. The title in German is Weltverschwörung, and the title in English is the same, only translated as World Conspiracy. I'm not very happy with the title. It was simply because my book had so many different topics where we simply couldn't find a good word summarizing everything in it. And so my publisher in German had the idea of, okay, let's simply call it something like conspiracy. Conspiracy always sells good, and then we simply took this word, world conspiracy. At the end, it came out that it fit very well together with the title of the second book. The second book is called Space Conspiracy, and or Weltraumverschwörung in German language, which then adds on what was already explained in the first book and gives the overall picture with the now time. In the first book, you go back to the very beginning. Where was mankind made? By whom was mankind made? What for was mankind made? And what were the difficulties that they discovered at that time, and the problems? And when we come back to the time we are living now, we of course experience everything what is the result of all these thousands of years of development, and it's thrilling. I didn't have the overall picture at the end of finishing my first book, and I wrote this first book because I researched all these topics of the book for more than 2 decades, and I couldn't think of anything else, and I was mad about this because I wanted to have a normal life. I wanted to think about normal things, and so I thought maybe writing it down would help me, and it did. Indeed, it helped me. I had around about 6 weeks, and then suddenly a friend of mine from China, a lady, gave me a link to a video, and I watched the video and said, this can't be. And then I watched the second video and the 50th video and the 100th video, and I said, okay, I have to write the second book because this is the answer, and this puts it all together. So I think when you want to have a summary of everything, what is really important to know, you should read both books. And there are many pages, perhaps 50 or 60 pages only of sources. So if you want to read many books, interesting books, you will find a very good list of them in those 2 books. Friends of mine and also normal, let's call them normal customers who read those books have written to me and told me that it's at the beginning quite tough to read those books because they are so compressed that every sentence, every phrase, every word has a meaning and must be regarded as important because the topics are so dense and the space of 400 pages or whatever they have is not big enough to put in like filling phrases, nice weather outside, etc. So you get a full packed information there about everything important you need to know to understand the situation we are living in now. And what we are living in now, we can look out of the window, we can watch television, mainstream videos and media and reports, so we are very close to maybe a third world war. And it could literally begin tomorrow. I wonder why it hadn't already begun. And maybe it can be stopped, but the situation is so strange and so mad in many details that with the normal newspaper knowledge or school knowledge, you have absolutely no chance to understand it. So you have to dig deep. And I just read something, I had to smile about it. I think her name was Candace Owens, or some sort
Candace
of celebrity, and there was a small picture giving a citation of her telling everybody who is by now not a conspiracy theorist is stupid or not intelligent enough, something like this. And
well, I think you're right. You know, I mean, one of the things about all these conspiracy theories, Thomas, is, I mean, I know that they came up with that label to denigrate anybody that does that, and some conspiracy theories are a bit out there, right? But I've always used the frame conspiracy analyst because it seems to me to make so much sense. But the other issue we have now is that so many of those conspiracy so-called theories have proven themselves to be true and are proving themselves to be true all the time. It's like the magician is revealing his tricks and the bamboozlement has deepened to a degree. They're, you know, going around in public demonstrating the fact that they're fooling you directly, but certain people have become so sort of hypnotized by it that they can't even sense that. It's very powerful. I mean, I'm sure their little psychological warfare units have been working like Billy-O when all this kind of stuff really started. And we've mentioned here on the show repeatedly, really, that we tend to the view that World War III began the minute World War II ended. It's just been in a different phase. There's been a lot of softening up. There's been a lot of pre-planning for it. But now it's, you know, we're in a period where it should be becoming obvious, and it is becoming obvious to an ever-increasing number of people. I think we're still challenged, though, with knowing quite what actions would be the best ones to take, because we're not used to it as a body of people. We're used to, whether we like it or not, being led. And breaking out of that is like a very deep conditioning that you only begin to sort of bump up against when you start to ask all these questions. And just coming back to your book, very important point, where do people get a copy or copies of the two books? Where would they go to purchase them?
You can find it on Amazon.
Right.
Very, very simple.
Aren't they the enemy? We can't go there. I want to send you a check in the post with a quill, and you're supposed to package it up and send it to me with a big long letter that you write with your fountain pen. Eric will sell you a fountain pen. You'll have to get a Fock and Hall fountain pen. Yeah, yeah.
Paul, it's very simple. Let the enemy work for you.
Yeah, no, we have to. We use whatever's available, don't we? We use whatever we can. Well, absolutely.
If I could just come in a little bit.
Go on, butt away.
Because butt away, shall I?
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, you said earlier about killing innocent civilians, and this reminded me of when I was at school. We had what they call a contract teacher come in, because our ordinary history teacher was on holiday, so we had this fella come in. He was a freelancer. I suppose you have them in Canada and Germany, don't you? Sort of freelance teachers go around. Anyway, on with the story. And this fella was one of the best teachers I think we've ever had, because when we did history, it was absolutely boring. You know, king this, queen that, going way back. And this fella did modern history, which we never did at school. And we had 2 weeks of modern history, and of course everybody was fascinated. And he was a great communicator, and I learned a hell of a lot in that 2 weeks. And it turned out that during World War II, he was in the RAF. He was in maintenance, I believe, of aircraft. He wasn't a pilot. And he was in the Far East. And the RAF were linked to the United States Army Air Force in the Far East. So I think they used the same landing strips, etc., etc. And he said, near the end of the war in Japan, and this is on the last day he said this before he walked out the room, and it was all sad to see him go, and he said, near the end of the war they ran out of targets, and he said, you won't find this in the history books, but the RAF and the United States Army Air Force were ordered to shoot at anything that moves. It doesn't matter whether it's Red Cross, it doesn't matter whether it's a hospital, children, adults, just create complete panic and trauma in Japan. And that's what they did. They just flew over Japan shooting at anything. And he said, you will not find that in any history books, but I know that to be 100% true. And he said, do not believe everything that you read in the history books. He said, because there's two sides to every story. Remember that and you won't go far wrong. And he walked out. I've never forgotten it. So I assume they had a possible similar policy over Germany. Sort of. So
I found that passage about Churchill talking about basting. There's just here. I'll read just the brief passage of it. Mr. Churchill. This is from David Irving's book on the destruction of Dresden. Mr. Churchill too had considered the JIC report on the implications of the new Soviet offensive. Late on January 25th, 1945, before going off for a drink with President Franklin D. Roosevelt's emissary, Harry Hopkins, Churchill had phoned Sir Archibald Sinclair, his Secretary of State for Air, to inquire what proposals Bomber Command had, as he put it, for, quote, basting the Germans in their retreat from Breslau. And there was, of course, no military retreat from Breslau. The city had been declared a fortress several months before. The retreat from Breslau was entirely an evacuation of non-combatants. So
nice guy, eh?
Yeah, lovely.
Top bloke. Yeah, amazing.
The chap
Sorry, Eric, please.
That's okay. Well, very quickly, the chap I worked with, who was a navigator during World War II, he was Polish, and he used to swear like a trooper. Almost every other word that he came out with was a swear word, and I think that may have been something to do with maybe the shell shock that he experienced or something from the war. But what happened, he was in the Polish army, and he came over here at the beginning of the war, and he went into the Polish branch of the RAF. And because he was studying to be, I think, in architecture, he became a navigator, because surveying and that type of thing, very similar. But anyway, he was on the Dresden raid, and I'm not sure what wave he was on, but I think he was on one of the later waves, because he said for over 20 miles you could actually see the sky was absolutely alight. It was just bright. And he said when they flew over the target, they flew as high as they could. And he said the engines, they put it on full power. And he said the wings used to sometimes bend with the sort of bow over with the load. And as they got closer and closer to Dresden, he said his navigational work wasn't really needed, because they knew exactly where they were going, because they had the Pathfinder mosquitoes flying underneath. And he said it was a miracle how bombs didn't drop on other bombers, which they probably did. But on with the story, he said he saw trees being ripped up by the roots, cars rolling over, and people rolling over. And how he saw that from 15,000 feet, I do not know, but that's what he told me. But what he did say was that he felt the bottom of the plane, and it was hot from the radiating heat coming up from Dresden. And
as a navigator, he was probably using telescopes.
Maybe. And he said the sights he saw were horrific, absolutely horrific. And I've said that horrific, but he'd use a lot of F words and a lot of words.
Well, he was training to become an architect, Eric, right? And we know what architects are like with their foul language, don't we?
Well, someone said, because his name was Mac, he said, who's he? I said, oh, he's the effing architect. So sorry, everybody roared. But also he used to be arrogant with people, and another contract, because I was freelance, another freelance bloke came in. He said he's arrogant. He says he hasn't been arrogant to me. I said, oh, don't worry, give him time. I said, that means he likes you if he's arrogant to you. Because the poor sob, what happened after the war, his wife, I think, stayed in Poland during the war, and the Red Cross linked them up. She came over here, and but I think he wishes she hadn't, because she actually nagged him and nagged him and nagged him, and he couldn't stand her. And he's going through a life of hell. So the poor sod went through all that during the war. Then the Red Cross found his wife, and he had a sort of like a second war. I shouldn't really laugh, after the war with his wife, but
which
anyway,
was worse. Only he would be able to tell you.
Yeah.
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 I want to mention someone who can't be here tonight because he's no longer alive, and we did do a show about him. A really dear friend of many of us. Dennis knew him. I knew him very well. A man whose book, Hellstorm, is really instrumental in me jumping into this field. I read it in 2014. That's Thomas Goodrich. And Tom would have been invited, and had he had the energy, it would have been wonderful to have his company this evening, but we can't. He left us, when was it? November, I think. October or November. My apologies for that. That seems like a long time ago right now. But a wonderful guy. And for those of you that have not read Hellstorm, it's extremely sober reading. Let's put it that way. But I think it's very important to read it because it reveals the intent of the other side with what they're willing to do, which is basically anything. And
Can you hear me?
there's we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Yes, a very good recommendation, but I would strongly like to add something to that. For everybody, for anybody who is interested in reading that book, Hellstorm, be aware. That is really heavy stuff. I tried to start it many times, and I think it was fourth or fifth attempt where I finally could read at least 10 pages of it. When you are over the introduction, it starts right to the point, and the scenery which is described there and the details are no doubt true. Which makes it even worse because they are so unspeakable that it's extremely tough to read this book, to realize what has happened, why, to whom, and how often. It was a real tough book to read.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. Tom was the most easygoing and charming guy. I loved him to bits. He was just a lovely guy, very softly spoken, very thoughtful. And I asked him, I don't know if we've got it recorded somewhere, I remember discussing with him how he came about the information. And he was saying that down in Florida, so I don't know, I mean, I think the book was published 2009, was it, or 2010? I got a copy 2014 anyway, a few years after it had been initially published. And down in Florida, a lot of retirement homes, as everybody's aware of, and there were a lot of German people there. And he was a trained historian anyway. He'd written books about the US Civil War and Scalp Dance, which is an amazing book, which is about the challenges that the white people, let's put it that way, because they came from faced when they were moving west across the plains in their confrontations with the Red Indians. And it's not all love and light, let's put it that way. It's just as savage in its own way as you read in Hellstorm. Tom had this ability or this capacity to be able to lay these things down in a very calm sort of way, and that's what makes the impact of them that much more dreadful, to be quite honest. But he started to visit these old people's homes as part of his research, and he met many Germans that had literally gone through it. Many old women who were young girls at the time, and older chaps who had managed to survive it. And it was from talking to them and getting their first-hand accounts, and many of them are in the book, and it's extremely moving. I can't describe it any other way. I've mentioned before that when I first read it, I had to stop and go for a walk around the garden every sort of 15 or 20 minutes to get my breath back, because it's the first time, and probably would be the first time for anybody, that when you read something like this, you can't really believe it. It's that foul. And yet he's done a great service because of it, because it's important to know that these things happen. And actually, a shout out to someone who's not been on this show, Karen, if you get to hear this. Karen, I mentioned this book to her a few months ago, and she went off and bought it and read it while she was taking a break in Costa Rica, of all places. And I was just, she was okay with reading it. I mean, actually, I need to probably sort of question her a little bit more about it, but it was amazing that she went off. I was amazed by that. Normally, I've mentioned this book to people, and understandably, they don't really want to sort of jump all over it. It's not like I've got a really wonderful book for you to read. It's a horrible book. And I used to say this. I said, Tom, you've written the most horrible book in the world. It's awful, and it really is. But that's where its great strength lies. Yeah, Monica.
Ditto to everything you've said. And it is essential reading. It's so difficult. It also took me quite a long time to work my way through it, because I would put it down for a few months, and then I'd pick it up again, and I basically made myself read to the end. It's very difficult reading, but it should be essential reading. That's how I see it. So, yes, ditto to all you have said.
Yeah. Well, I obviously must have liked it, because I ended up doing the audio book, and that was quite a thing as well, just to sort of stay steady on that. But the first time through was the worst, let's put it that way. But an amazing guy. So, Tom, if you're listening, in great part, this show's for you, for the great work that you did, because certainly I wouldn't be here probably, and got drawn into looking at all of this without that book. I was looking at other books as well at the time, but this one has got an impact that's unlike any other. I think that's true to say. And therefore, if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you do, and take your time over it. You might need to pause quite a bit, but you must become familiar with it. I think on a positive note, on a very moving note, there's a scene towards the end of the book of a German infantryman, if that's probably not the right, returning home, and his mother had not seen him for like 7 years. He'd gone away in 1938, and he came back, and his mum didn't recognise him. She didn't even know who he was. She walked past him twice in the street. And he was so altered by what had taken place. And no doubt those moments like that occurred on many sides. I accept all that. I'm not trying to, say people had a greater emotional impact on one side than another, but it's very telling in the context of what happened. And the main point about that book, and this brings us right into today as well, and is yet again a fact that we've said many times, and we'll no doubt say it many more times, is that more Germans were killed after the war than during it. And when you take into account Dresden and the other great calamities, that really does need to be borne in mind, because it shows that the intent was pretty much this wretched quote from Churchill again, where he said, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, he said, "This war is not against Hitler or National Socialism, but it's against the strength of the German people, which must be wiped out once and for all." That's the gist of it. I've mullered it a little bit, but that's what Churchill was saying towards the late 30s, which of course is really rather odd, because in the early 30s or even in the 20s, he was championing, said very positive things, until I suspect he got a little word in his ear. This is all I can, it's a guess on my part, but I suspect strongly that that's really what happened to him. So, yeah. And Benton Bradbury's book is it's a gentler take. So if you're new to this, I would start off with Benton Bradbury, really, and The Myth of German Villainy, if you're an English reader. And for German readers, head on over and pick up Thomas's books. Yeah, and English readers too.
But what my father found is that people would believe the propaganda and tell him and look down upon him, which was very frustrating, even though he was there and he was an eyewitness to the different things.
The power of propaganda.
And the I mean, I could go on for ages about some of the frustrations that he had. That's why he wrote a book. It took him 10 years to write, because he just got so fed up with people believing a pack of lies and not wanting to hear the truth.
Yeah, and the question is, how many people actually know about Dresden and what happened, and know that it even happened? If you just ask the man on the street, I doubt very many know anything about it. And the fact of the matter is, why was it targeted? Why was Dresden targeted? I mean, this goes back to, I believe it was 1882. This is kind of I think a reason that it's been such a hard thing to muster up the reasoning why, but it was the first meeting of the anti-Semitic party was in Dresden. We know that there was a meeting of the World Zionist Congress. The first one was in Basel, Switzerland. Well, the first anti-Semitic party meeting was in 1882 in Dresden. And I've learned a lot about this from reading about Karl Lueger, who was Viennese mayor around that time, and one of the heads of the anti-Semitic party, as it was called. And the fact that it's been such a taboo subject, because what ends up happening is the guilt gets placed on people to this day. They get called this name anti-Semitic that dates back to Dresden. And this tragedy of what happened to Dresden is projected onto the labor camps. And we're dealing with this to this day. We have area bombings going on in Gaza, and we have similar type situation going on in Ukraine. And it's a cowardly form of warfare that's taking place. You have people remotely controlling drones from thousands of miles away, bombing innocent people all the time. And this is what we're going to have to rectify one of these days, is how is this going to end?
Yes. Well, I think one of the things that Tom covers so well in his book is the psychological warfare side, particularly from Ehrenberg in Russia. And as Monika mentioned earlier, Sefton Delmer, who was the head of sort of black ops over here. And one of the things that's very revealing in the Goebbels diaries, because Goebbels was no slouch when it came to this sort of stuff, but this very odd sort of relationship by distance that he had with Churchill. It was obviously not a relationship, but his observations of Churchill's lies and which ones he was going to use. It has to be borne in mind that propaganda is being waged all over the place. And one of the things that Tom makes, his point is that basically the Germans were outgunned on the propaganda stakes. And I think when you look at it and you look at what we're enduring now, this mind conditioning through the colossal power of the media, which is not perceived to be colossal, but people, in the same way that fish don't see that they're swimming in water, it surrounds us all the time. And as we've mentioned here before, it's not so much what they include, it's what they omit. It's what's not known. And you were just saying that most people are not up to speed on this other account. They don't know it. They don't know that there is another account. They don't know that there is an account from the so-called losers of the war. But of course, as I would suggest that we were all losers. The Germans, of course, in the most dreadful way through events like this. This process carries on. And it's our governments that are obviously now, I mean, this is no longer shorthand. It's not like, oh, the bloody government. It's like literally, yes, the bloody government. Wherever you are, these are the great sort of curses that we have upon us. And Eric, I'm coming back to that thing you wrote a couple of weeks ago about Poland, after the fall of the wall, where they didn't have a government for 2 years and everything flourished. And I suspect that's what would happen just about everywhere if we got back to sort of local governance and started to take control of our lives back into our hands. But of course, we've been trained, or the great mass have been trained, to look to government for the answer as a god all the time to sort out our problems. This thing happens all the time. Anyway, we're coming towards the end of our slot on WBN right now. So I want to thank you on WBN. We will, of course, be back at the same time next week. We're going to carry on talking. Dennis is probably going to leave us shortly. So, Dennis, I'll let you say a few words just after the break. I'm going to play a song here to play us out at the end of the show. We'll be back again here on WBN, same time next week. But we're carrying on the show for a little while longer over on Rumble. So if you want to connect into that, head on over to paulenglishlive.com, click the Rumble link, and you will hook up with all the other reprobates in the chat room and what they're doing there. So that's fine. I've got another little song. I've just dug this one out. This is another Charlie and his orchestra. This is very English song. This is Tea for Two. I think it might be English. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to play out with this right now, and we will see you on the other side of the break. And as I said, back again next week.
mighty strong in Germany, which causes England jealousy. She doesn't like our unity. She wants to rule the seas alone. No one should like us. Everyone should fight us. No friends or relations. No weekend vacations. She won't have it known that we even own a dime for a glass of beer. England's humanity, it's a fate. The world soon awakes. That'll be our break. Our birthday cake. Whoopee! Come on, have fun in Germany. We will raise the world's family. Let's all live in harmony. Oh, can't you see how happy we would be?
And welcome back to, well, the beginning of the third hour. And we're off WBN right now, but we're still carrying on here on Rumble. And Dennis, I just mentioned that you might have to take your leave. Is there any sort of closing comment you would like to make now? And just to let you know, I'd like to get you back on pretty soon so we can all have a little bit more mic time. Everybody's been brilliant tonight because everybody's aware that we've got quite a few voices around the mics, but I think it's kind of worked really well. But any sort of parting shots or anything you'd like to say, Dennis, to sort of, close out the show?
Okay. Can you hear me, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, the main reason I came on, like I said, I'm no expert. And I just wanted to hear what people have to say, and I'm quite happily sitting in the background listening a lot of the time. Very interesting on what is, a real sad occasion.
It is. Yeah, it is a sad occasion. And it seems to indicate and point to even more sad occasions if we don't get our act together. But, yeah. Well, I'd love to have you back anyway at some point soon, so we'll have a chat. And thanks for all your great work. And if you want to catch or get hold of any of Dennis's videos, head over to moneytreepublishing.com. All three major videos are there. Is there any sort of selling you want to do? Anything you want to promote or say about that, Dennis, right now while we're still here?
I think that more than my documentaries, I'm quite sure there's other material over there. Will be people will be happy to browse through, especially the Hellstorm ones there as well. So yeah, no problem.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad your health's improving. It's been great to have you. Yeah, Eric. Oh, Monica, sorry.
No, it was me. You're a very humble man, and we appreciate your work so much. I will never forget the first time I actually watched the first of those major documentaries, The Greatest Story Never Told. And it was really quite profound, the impact it had on me, and then the subsequent, communism through the back door, and then the next one, the secret Masonic victory of World War II. And so, yeah, I just want to say a shout out to you for all that work. And you're very humble, so I appreciate that too. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate
your words. Yeah, thank you. And all the best to your brother and the rest of your friends.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, you have a good night.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Night, Dennis. Thank you. See you soon. Keep well. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Night.
Dennis Wise, everybody, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with his work, but if you're not, you need to get familiar with it because it's really important stuff, very much in a similar vein to the discussion that we've been having here today, but covering the Freemasonic aspect and communism through the back door, which of course is really, we could still call it communism that we're actually enduring right now. Over here in England, of course, we have Starmer Stalin, who's a full-blown, retarded, high-powered socialist, globalist doodad, and very much in line with all of this kind of stuff, the sort of nonsense that we're having to deal with. Of course, in Germany, haven't you got what's this AfD lark? Thomas, what's going on with the AfD in Germany?
Is Thomas not with us?
Oh, he's lagged it.
He seems
to... Hang on. Let me just have a look. Oh, no, he's there. He seems to have disappeared off the... I'll add him back to the stage. Thomas, are you there?
I'm back again.
Oh, I see. You had to go... Yeah, I see. You had to go and get some, whatever it was. What do I say? Wiener Schnitzel or something? Or beer? What is it? Is it? Oh, look, I'm being corrected all the time. I wish I'd never used the word bloody expert right on. Everybody's denying it all the time. I never use it. I thought they use it all the time. They have experts in every single newspaper column. I thought, well, we'll be one then. We'll be experts. Why not?
Trust the experts. Trust the experts.
You trust us, everybody. We know what we're talking about. You don't know anything. We're experts, you see, whatever that means. Huh?
An X is passed.
The AfD. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, just very quick. I was going to say an X is passed, and a spurt is a continuous drip. So that's it. Sorry, carry on, Thomas.
That's an English joke.
You asked me about the AfD in Germany.
Yes, am I going to regret this?
Well, okay, where to begin? The AfD is led by that Mrs. Weidel. Mrs. Weidel is a former Goldman Sachs lady. So she comes from the banking business and from a very special banking business. So competence must rise somewhere. You must be educated somewhere. So it's not necessarily a bad sign, but I'm very skeptic. However, she is doing great in the interviews, and she is telling people directly into their face what things are going on here and how things are going on. And so the alternative to Mrs. Weidel from the AfD is Friedrich Merz. Friedrich Merz was, as it seems, as I posted in my channel some days ago, treated in a hospital for mental instability because he obviously tried to commit suicide in 2016 or something. I don't recall it quite exactly, but I think it was 2016, 17, something like that. And the medical paper is shown on that post with a copy and with the exact diagnostic term. Friedrich Merz already said very clearly what he will do when he is elected Chancellor of Germany. He will send weapons of mass destruction, long-range missiles to Ukraine, which will then, of course, be used to targets within Russia, which will, of course, lead to an answer of Russia.
Yeah.
And I might add, of course, to the origin of those problems. So what he surely will do is not send a member of his family to the front, but he will send long-range missiles to the front and to Russia, and then very probably lead us into a hot war with Russia. And I told you already this I think it was 2 shows ago. The German army has a stock of ammunition which lasts for exactly 2 days of a full rage war. And 2 days is a kind of blitzkrieg. And okay, blitzkrieg is a German invention, but blitzkrieg today against Russia within 2 days is quite a challenge, I guess. So
I like that. Quite a challenge, yes.
I'm also very skeptic on this position. So I tend to have the opinion that this will be a bad situation for Germany or the German people, not Friedrich Merz perhaps. On the other side, we have Olaf Scholz, the man who forgot everything, and Habeck as Minister of Destruction. Not destruction. The word was business. Yeah, business. He ruined Germany within a very short time, and you cannot even tell it was stupidity, because even a stupid guy somehow sometimes picks a good thing, but they didn't pick any good thing. They ruined really everything extremely fast and brutal and fundamental.
Yeah.
So when we are looking at the different states in Germany where they have local parliaments, also with AfD, CDU, SPD, etc., all those parties, and especially in the former middle part of Germany, the so-called Eastern German part of Germany, the former German Democratic Republic, where we have the AfD sitting with a majority in many of those parliaments. But we don't see the AfD ruling in those countries, in those states. Why? Because there is a so-called Brandmauer, a firewall against the AfD. The so-called democratic parties tell everybody to not work together, and they don't want to work together with the non-democratic party, the AfD. So they reject anything which might look like they are working together or even accepting the votes of the AfD. And they have minority governments within all those local states of Germany where the AfD has the majority. So even if the AfD has the majority, they cannot rule, because all those other parties will then build a coalition between 2, 3, 4 parties and try to rule against the majority. This is what has been done. So when we are looking at the now coming election in February in all of Germany, where we have the parties like CDU, CSU, SPD, the Green, the Left, and the AfD, we are talking about basically the same situation. As long as the AfD has less than 51%, there will be a minority government against the AfD. So even if the German people try to vote in majority for the AfD, they will end up with a minority government with CDU, SPD and Green.
Well, I'm shocked. I'm glad you're sceptical, for I remain sceptical too. But it was interesting what you said about her saying many of the right things. Since Mr. Trump has arrived, he says things that everybody wants to hear as well. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, because I don't think he's in charge. I suspect the people that head up the AfD are not really in charge. Whenever Elon Musk runs around the world now, he's always supporting people and saying things doing stuff.
Let me add something. Sorry. The origin of the AfD. I don't recall now the name, but I know the name of the founder of the AfD is a buddy of some American CIA general, very famous name.
They're probably just good friends, play golf and everything. There's nothing in it.
Of course, they only drink beer together. That's right. The whole story. Nothing to see here, ladies and gentlemen. No. Please go on. I don't recall the name. I'm sorry about that. But I think it's easy to Google that. So
how old is the party?
10 years?
Excuse me. Oh, it's not that
very
old.
young, very young, very young. It's on my tongue, that name, but
don't worry about it. It's fine. We'll be doing a Heads of the CIA quiz later on this year, so we can all bone up on it and get it right. I won't worry about that. We're not, it's just CIA's fair enough. They've got their hands up everybody's rear ends.
Even now, the story gets even worse. So even if we would have a situation where the AfD just by chance and good luck gets the absolute majority of 51%, then we are still in a Germany which is no state. This is what we talked about in one of the last shows.
Yeah.
Because the legal situation of Germany is devastating. It's simply it's not existing. It doesn't exist. We have no constitution. We still have the basic law of the occupied country, the basic law according to the Haager Kriegsordnung. It's Article 44 or 45, I don't know exactly. For the time of the occupation, the country has to have a basic law, which we call Grundgesetz, to have everything in order and working correctly. And within the so-called Grundgesetz, the German basic law, the last article of the law, very easy to find. Go to the last page, read it. This Grundgesetz is not a constitution. It's very clear words. This is not a constitution. And the Grundgesetz will cease to exist at that moment when the German people will give themselves a constitution in free and secret voting election.
I have a question for you. A question on that topic of this constitution and Grundgesetz and all of that. And maybe part of this question is rhetorical, but do the children learn about this in school? That's the first part of the question.
Oh, you're so witty, Monika.
Okay, that part is rhetorical. The second,
it's nice that I'm forced to laugh at this time of the day. Very nice. Yeah. No.
I'm sorry.
Nice.
Okay, what
nice
do they
idea.
learn? What do they learn in school about their own government?
About I must confess, it's already a little longer ago since I went to school. What I learned at school was, I think, compared to today, rather good. I think the things have gone south since then. What I learned at school about German politics, I went to school before 1990, so I was in a legal state. At least we had a Grundgesetz with an area of existence. This comes to the second point. So when we are talking about Germany, you tend to think that we have a constitution. I told you we don't have a constitution, we have a Grundgesetz. Okay, so yes, we have a Grundgesetz. Well, a Grundgesetz, a basic law, must have an area of existence, of where it is valid. But the article in the Grundgesetz where it was mentioned, this Grundgesetz is valid in the area of Baden-Württemberg, Saxony, during Bavaria, etc., was deleted in 1990. And now tell me, where is that law valid when you delete the article where it is written, where it is valid? So
you're going to have to get your paperwork sorted out. It sounds a right mess over there. Who's done that, right? You know, we've got this impression of German administrative efficiency. Well, it's obviously up, without a paddle, isn't it? There's some very rude and blunt comments, I should just say. AFD, Warren writes that AFD stands for a wunsch of bankers. This is a British a sort of joke, a wunsch of bankers. And Harvey's swearing like mad. It stands for any effing difference. Does it make any effing difference? So, yes, I'll just let you know that we've got some rather rude people in the chat, and I'm very glad of it, by the way. And also, just another little comment from Aunt Sally, just hopping back a bit. I'd just like to read a few of these things out. Aunt Sally, welcome this evening. Aunt Sally, hope you've had a bath and everything and all that kind of stuff. And she writes, she said, I found Hellstorm a very tough read, but it enabled me to connect the dots. It also destroyed the myth that we were the good guys, once and for all. Oh, the lies, indeed. Oh, the lies. And what lies are being told now? Rivers of them. All those heroic war films, she writes, we had to watch as children in the 60s. All that propaganda, all lies. Yeah, it was. It was, unfortunately, regrettably, but now, understandably, from this certain perspective. So, yes. Anyway, well, maybe the German history lessons will improve, Thomas. Maybe German children are going to learn something about their real history. What do you think of the chances of that? They don't learn about it over here in England much. I can't imagine. They're all being taught Islam now over here. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yippee!
Of course, they learn a lot about German history, but only about the official German history, which of course is a pack of lies. So they learn a very lot about the so-called Holocaust. They learn a lot about the tragedy of the so-called Nazi government. They learn a lot about the criminal intent and the crimes of the Nazi government, and all the rest is
Thomas,
not told and not
are they
talked
allowed to
about.
homeschool there?
No, absolutely forbidden.
That's something I learned at a very young age, and I was always puzzled about that because, we went over to Germany as a family on average every 5 years while I was growing up, and I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. And not that I was being homeschooled or anything, but I remember our cousins, they were telling us that even just to get one day off of school, like if the parents wanted to extend the holiday or something, they needed like a letter from God pretty much. And certainly homeschooling was completely outlawed. And I was very aware that homeschooling was actually kind of a common thing in Canada. And like I say, I wasn't homeschooled. I wish that had been the case. But anyway, it always puzzled me. It always puzzled me. Now, why would they make it against the law? And why is the attendance so strictly enforced? And now I do understand why, because the Germans had to be re-educated, umerzogen. They had to get the state education, didn't they?
Yes, the so-called the official order for the U.S. military about the re-education of the German people is in my book. It's a one-pager where it is very clearly told and described how to work on the German people regarding this re-education in every aspect of their life. And I just Googled it. The founder of the AfD was Georg Pazerski, who had ties to General Petraeus. And those two worked together in organizing the AfD, the Alternative for Germany. So I'm skeptic if this is a real thing. So
I don't think it is. I don't think it's a real thing at all. I don't think anything that's going on is really real. It's an immensely a worldwide orchestrated theatre now, surely. I mean, certainly for people like us, we can see it.
You're right, Rob. You're right, Paul. Yeah, you're spot on. And do you know who was behind the, inverted commas, denazification of Germany? The Frankfurt School, when they relocated to America. They were the advisors on that, the Frankfurt School, communists. You can look it up.
It wasn't that long after World War II here in America that they had compulsory public school attendance. It took place in the 50s, and before that time, you didn't have, your taxes didn't go to public schooling like they do now, and you weren't compelled to send them to any sort of school. But at the same time, we had parochial schools, which are Catholic schools. And they lost all of their funding to the public schools. And then it became to the point where you had to be wealthy in order to send your children there, unless you had some sort of benefactor helping you out. But I was homeschooled, by the way, from the age of 12. So it's definitely something that anybody should look into if they have school-age children, to send their children, take their children out of the government schools, homeschool them.
Absolutely.
They're
going to get a real education that way.
But what
from their
people,
parents.
going back to sort of Dresden and World War II, what people overlook is that, or my belief is, World War II was over one word. And it absolutely irritates me. I keep saying this, usury. Because in 1933, Mr. H abolished usury, went for the banks. He was not allowed to get away with it. And I believe two things. One is they wanted to destroy Germany because to show any other countries that had any ideas about abolishing usury. And number two, with Dresden, it may be, now I haven't any solid evidence on this, but it's just a theory I've got, that the Allies wanted to show the Soviets what firepower they have. Look, look at us.
In David Irving's book, he talks about that they did.
Yeah.
They wanted to really have a show of force for Stalin.
Because let's face it, they was producing ammunition and bombs. They had so much they didn't know what to do with it. And as a sort of a side issue, I worked on a project many years ago, and a couple of days before I went there, it was actually on site. It was a site office where I worked, which I preferred actually, because you're designing it as the building's going up, basically. And what happened is it was an ex-American Air Force base, part of it, and a digger dug up a tail fin of a bomb, and several others, and they evacuated the site, and they got a bomb disposal along. But all it was a load of tail fins that the Americans had left there after the war. That's all it was. No bombs, just tail fins. So there might have been someone, a bit of a practical joker, that thought, hey, sometime in the future someone's going to dig these up and think they're bombs. But it's surprising how much from World War II is still around. I mean, I also worked down at Billingsgate in London, the redevelopment, and we was all standing here having our sort of morning coffee, looking out the window, and it was right next to the River Thames, and we noticed this. They have a lot of barges that carry spoil away along the river and all stuff like that. We saw this great sort of pile of soil, and army fellas there, and army sort of boats, flashing lights and that. I thought, that's a bit strange. Why are they guarding a pile of soil? That's weird. It went right under our window. That's weird, isn't it? Well, apparently it was a big Herman that was still alive, and they took it to Silbury and blew it up. But after all those years, it was still live. And we were standing next to the window as it's going underneath the window, going, I wonder what that is, you know.
Yeah,
Yes,
I was in
finding
Freiburg
bombs.
some years ago, and they were digging up bombs, and it's quite common. They find a bomb, and then they bring the bomb disposal team in, and a lot of times they just end up detonating it.
Well, there was a very sad film that I saw. It was made in 1948, and many, many years ago it was shown on television. It's black and white, and it's a documentary. And after World War II, the German bomb disposal got together with the British bomb disposal, and they went round Hamburg and Berlin and places like that, taking the obviously dealing with these unexploded bombs. And the people that did this were sort of like the flat-footed. Some of them had glasses that were like sort of bottles of beer bottles, the sort of academic type, the pleasant type. And the end of this film showed you the list of the poor souls that have been blown up. Very few of them survived on both sides.
What, from the unexploded bomb teams? The guys that were...
From the unexploded... Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and apparently they worked absolutely fantastically together because they helped each other with the knowledge of these bombs. And, some of them were DAs.
You touch on a thing there, though, that working well together. I know we have been culturally pitted against one another. There's been the football, hasn't there, and all that kind of stuff. And, the football, bloody hell, and all this kind of stuff. And you just look at it. When you stand back, you have to stand back and take a breath and get out of the whirlwind of the brainwashing. And you go, you see how mad it is. And it really is brothers' wars. And it's not been orchestrated by us. The man in the street didn't want this. Of course, we've got all these other aspects of it that Irving has, he's not the only one, but he's clearly revealed. I still keep coming back to these 38 letters, these peace offerings to Churchill, who wouldn't have any of it, and had them intercepted. So the British public are denied that. It's the stuff that they keep out of the space, as it were, to allow people to think. And they don't. Well, Stalin said something like that. Thinking's more dangerous than guns. We don't give people guns, so we certainly don't want them to think. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. And of course, we're in that melee right now. It's non-stop. But just going back to this AFD thing, I mean, I suppose you'd be able to take some comfort Thomas, from the fact that she used to work at Goldman Sachs, at least your economy will be managed well. You know, they're quite good, aren't they? So that's a good thing. You know, Goldman Sachs, jolly good, profitable firm there. Probably lost without usury, but hey-ho, you know, so it goes. All of these sorts of... I just think the whole thing is just one massively coordinated theatre, because there's been just, over the last couple of years, certainly since Musk arrived at X or Twitter, they have released the censorship on it, and I'm deeply suspicious of it. It's as if it's a flushing out thing to get people to shoot their mouths off more and more and to encourage other people. And people need to bear in mind, I mean, you know, we can't avoid it anyway. This is a massive tracking system, the internet, and you have to go, so what? We're using it to maintain morale or whatever you want to call it right now. And we must, I intend to keep on doing that, because if the number's up, it's already up anyway, you know, with all of these sorts of things. And when you were mentioning earlier, you know, about the German education where they just get the established view, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the established view. It's very, very useful. What I have a problem with is that we're denied the other view, and we're absolutely denied a space in which an honourable discussion can take place. That's the problem, is the controlling of the communications process. I know I'm only stating the bleeding obvious, but it's literally that. You know, you think, well, we can sit down and talk about things. I'm quite happy to be corrected. If I'm wrong, I'm glad of it, because you've corrected me and shown me something that I didn't know, and now I'm less stupid than I was. I'm still not wise, but, you know, we're chiseling away at that. But when the event is denied, when you can't do this, and we heard someone the other day, Malefica sent me a clip of some guy, or was it Shelley? Shout out to Shelley. She sent a clip of some guy, some English guy over here who's got some kind of a history thing, just banging on about Dresden, having a pop at this approach, as if you question the mere fact that you want to question it means you're a Nazi. But then I thought, well, I do have toast every morning for breakfast, and I'm sure Nazis had toast for breakfast, so I probably am a Nazi. I mean, it's ludicrous. And you're dragged down to this sort of name-calling thing, and you can never get them to be calm. It's always bombastic. It's always like we heard this from David Irving, shorthand for, therefore, it's not to be trusted. I mean, it's beyond dense, right. But it works. They silence us by not allowing us to have a voice. And of course, over here, the English haven't had a voice for donkey's years.
Naughty Nazism. I think that there's what I call naughty Nazi. People suffer from naughty Nazi syndrome. And who's that bloke with the croaky voice? Alex Jones. He suffers from naughty Nazi syndrome. Yeah, it was the Nazis, you know. If you talk any subject you want, you could talk about dog poo. Yeah, the Nazis had this design where they put dog poo on the paper and people would slip on it. Yeah, it's the Nazis that did it. And anything that's negative would be the naughty Nazis. So these people suffer from naughty Nazi syndrome. And I find it funny in many ways. I sort of try and hype them up a little bit more, you know, sort of add some more fiction to it, you know. I mean, it's just... Well,
it's worth elaborating it. You just say everything is their fault all the time. It's the default position for people running into a brick wall or wanting to not have it discussed. Actually, just changing tack slightly. Monica, I wanted to ask you a question. Although it's, of course, you know, it's all locked into what's taking place right now. Are you happy that America is going to buy Canada or whatever they're going to do? Is this what's going to happen? Are you thrilled about this? What's going on?
Well, oh my goodness, it's kind of like I'm taking a seat in the theater and watching things unfold. I find everything that's unfolding extremely interesting. And I can't even really answer that sort of with a yes or no, because I'm seeing things in a larger context that, you know, this free trade agreement in 1988, which back then, even though I was asleep at the wheel still, I was fighting against that. And I organized, you know, panel discussion and this and that. And I was really speaking loudly against that free trade agreement. That was back in 88, and then came the North American Free Trade Agreement, because that first one was just Canada and United States. But now I see all this and I'm thinking they kind of have this in mind since a long time, to go the way of sort of like the European Union. And then I've seen something about, the plans for 10 zones around the world. And one of them would entail North America, Mexico, Canada, and United States. And I don't know, is this what's unfolding right now? I kind of think it is.
Yes.
But there is lively theater going on right now. If you listen to the mainstream media, the CBC, I mean, it's kind of comical in a way, the way Jagmeet Singh, this joke of a NDP, that's the New Democrat Party leader, and so he kind of had the opposition there, the party, and he's wearing a turban, he's one of these East Indian types, and I put Trump on notice, and I mean, I just had to laugh my head off because the guy is just a joke. It's like, oh yeah, he's got so much power, this guy, this Jagmeet Singh character. I put Trump on notice, and like he's really gonna make a difference. Anyway, I don't know how to answer that other than I'm kind of watching things unfold with great interest and sitting back. But I was going to say something earlier and now I've forgot. It was in response to, anyway, when it comes back to me, I will butt in.
Yes, you're allowed to. You're allowed to. I mean, these different areas of the world, there's basically one theme all the time. I understand in Canada that you've had, not that it's reported much here, but I've got, through my wife's side, we've got relations in Canada, and they come over here quite regularly, and I'll probably be seeing one of them pretty soon, I guess, and I get updates. Haven't you had an influx, a glut of Chinese people over the recent period?
We've had an influx of everybody. We have a huge influx of as my friend told me the other day, the dot Indians, as opposed to the feather Indians. Our Indians are called the feathers.
And the Jeters.
Those are the dots.
All right,
and it's huge.
Yeah.
And then Chinese, there are regions where, you think you've gone to China, in part of Vancouver and other parts too. There's always a Chinatown everywhere. And yeah, we've got basically an influx from all around the world, and it's becoming so in your face obvious now. We've also got an invasion right off the boat from Africa, like Jasper, the town that burnt down, and the town where I lived for 37 years of my life and don't live there anymore. But last summer, July 24th, 1/3 of the town burnt down. And
I didn't know that. I was there some years ago. It was a very nice town.
Yes, it's already been kind of transforming before that fire, but it's really transformed now because, they call it a wildfire. There was a huge forest fire, but I still say it was created through all the conditions they create with their geoengineering, the chemtrailing and whatnot. They basically set that up to happen. And then the part of the town that burnt down happened to be the low density housing, the part of town that was established people who had, upper middle class, you could say, the railroaders, the professionals, and the European stock people, you could say. That part burnt down. And I mean, they just a few months before that fire. Yeah. And just before that fire happened, one of the town councillors had gone off to Ottawa for some kind of a housing planning meeting. Canadians from all over the place were there to discuss the needs for housing in Canada. And I can't remember how many new houses they said were needed in Canada by the year whatever 2030 or whatever, and Jasper had the obligation for 200 new houses by this certain deadline, and Jasper, that doesn't sound like a lot, but Jasper has legislated town boundaries, being in the national park as it is. And so where would these new houses be built? Well, how convenient is this now that the low density part of the town burnt down? And when I was only there once since that fire, happened to be on September 11th, that's just coincidental. But anyway, I remember seeing all these cleaning outfits, because the people whose houses did not burn down, they could use insurance money to get the deep cleaning after the fire, because there were obviously lots of, serious smoke happening, and some of it toxic, and they were getting deep cleaning. And these vans that were there, I'm telling you, why didn't they hire the people who were living there who needed work? There's no tourism happening just after the fire, none at all. And normally that's what would be happening in July and August, would be massive amount of tourism. So that's how people are making their living. So why aren't they hiring those people? No, I saw a lot of people that were fresh off the boat from Africa, and a lot of them were standing around checking out their cell phones, standing around in front of these white vans that were some cleaning company. And I just thought, well, maybe it's a coffee break. But then, later in the day, I still saw them standing around. I thought, oh, it's an extended coffee break. I also learned from a friend of mine who lives there still, and her house did not burn down, thank goodness. But I learned from her that the people who were getting the deep cleaning done, and it might take 3 days or whatever, they could not go into their homes. They had to leave their homes. They could not even go back at night to sleep there. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Why do they have to vacate their homes while this deep cleaning going on from total foreigners? And, maybe the person directing these people fresh off the boat who can't speak English, maybe they might be a white guy or whatever, but it was all very suspicious looking to me. What's going on? Were they, setting up some kind of monitors in the homes, or I don't know. I do not know. I'm just asking the question. Why did they have to leave their home and not sleep there even, what's going on with that? But I kind of got sidetracked.
It sounds like FEMA to me in California, where all the houses with blue painted roofs survived the fires, and all the rest burned down, and then FEMA came in and shot the rest.
Well, what gets me is, why don't they have logging camps going in and clearing out all the dead brush and whatnot that cause these wildfires to occur? It's kind of like California, the similar situation.
Because it wasn't a wildfire. It was a directed energy weapon.
Well, it basically becomes a directed energy weapon. And the thing of it is that I find interesting is we get a lot of Canadians that come down here to buy lumber for construction. And it's like, what? Canada is full of woods. What are you doing coming down here to get milled wood? It doesn't make any sense until you realize that the regulations and whatnot that they put on you.
Also, a lot of the big lumber yards, they were shut down over the years, just for whatever reason. I mean, I guess, like one of you said earlier, the war never really ended. We are in a war, and all of these things that don't make sense, that's why they don't make sense, because we're living in a war. That's the big thing, isn't it? So what do we do? Yes, take your children out of school. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to reiterate that from one of you who said that's the best advice for young families who have children in school. Take them out. It's a dangerous place to send your children. And I would also say to young people, have children. This is something that they have been scaring. Every generation has some kind of a big scare to cause them to not want to have children. In my youth, it was the big nuclear scare, and these days it's the big climate scare for the children. remember the Fridays for Future, FFF happens to be 666 if you look at it that way with the letters of the alphabet, and the children all being basically said, yeah, it's okay if you skip school on Fridays to protest the climate emergency, and which is the biggest lie of all. And this, of course, is their tool. Everybody on this panel knows that, but just in case some listeners are not fully aware, that lie took me the longest to figure out. It took me longer than the World War II big taboo subject lie. It took me longer to figure out this carbon. Oh, carbon is bad. Well, we just happen to be carbon-based life on Earth.
Well, I love carbon.
Dispossessing people of their lands.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. I look at here in Wisconsin, up in Ashland, we used to have the largest blast furnace in the world. We made the most steel in the world. and that was taken from us. And what they did is they did it through incremental environmental regulations. And what they did is a lot of the coal that they were using came from trees that they would forest in upper Wisconsin. And now one of the first national forests was the Chequamegon National Forest, which all surrounds Ashland. And it was a way to deindustrialize the place. And just like in World War II, they went after the Ruhr, the big blast furnaces that you had there in their Duisburg and places. And today, what's happening in Donetsk? It's the biggest blast furnace in Europe. And that's where they have the war right now, dispossessing all of the Ukrainians that live there.
All of these things are intertwined, aren't they? To strip out the means of controlling our lives directly. Everything has to be indirect. There was a book that floated around about 20 odd years ago about interdependence, a complete nonsense idea. It's just shorthand for systems control. You say, I don't believe in free trade at all. I believe in tariffs and barriers, because how are you supposed to protect a nation? And I believe every nation should do that. So all of so-called modern economic thinking is basically modern economic warfare against nations. And the common thread here, which is obvious to all of us, is we're talking about parts of the world where our people predominantly are, where our history is, which are our traditional, ancient, cultural and racial homelands. It's not happening anywhere else. There's literally no reason at all for England to have ever brought in one migrant ever. And the same for Canada. Right. And none of them, not one. We don't need any of them. This is not a hostile observation. It's simply true. Yet the entire establishment is basically globalist. All of our governments are all waging war against all of their people because they're part of another club. And to paraphrase George Carlin, we're not in it. And I'm thankful for that, because I wouldn't want to be in their position, considering the heinous crimes that they're committing against their own kith and kin. But they probably don't even feel that anymore. We don't have the ability to communicate with these people. I mean, it's not possible.
You're right. And what we have is people of our kin and kith fighting each other or arguing with each other because of the lies and deceptions, the psychological warfare that's been waged on us. And so this is where our work that we're doing right now with this kind of thing is so important, is to help people understand what's really going on, because how terrible and tragic that is if we, our own people, are fighting each other. I don't mean in the literal sense, although that's going on too with brother wars, right now in Ukraine and whatnot. But in terms of arguing with each other about what's best for us, and the mostly youth who have been so scared, put into the state of fear about the climate change lie, then, they're going out there blasting their grandparents or their parents' generation for, supposedly having, brought them to the brink of
not to mention the COVID psyop.
Yes, exactly. So that's where this work is so important. And people sometimes accuse us of speaking within an echo chamber. Well, that's where the listeners, that's where you can help by sharing these things with people that may not yet fully understand. You all probably have contact with family members or friends or neighbors that don't yet fully understand the story, and maybe they don't understand any of it. And everybody can do their bit in trying to help to wake our people up.
I completely agree, Monika. I mean, I think I keep trying to boil it down to where's the little switch that has to be flicked. What is it that's kind of missing? I mean, you mentioned there about our people not having enough children. People are always say, you're on your way out because you're not having enough children. But there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. One of them is that we are generally, overall, not entirely, but a responsible type of people. And so you think, and also we raise young in a different way, and we always have. We seek and have always sought to have relatively small families where you can put a lot of input into the children. Other races don't operate like that. They operate on large-scale families. It's more of a numbers game. I've forgotten. The one's called K and one's called Y or something in terms of the reproduction orientation.
Or R.
Yeah.
K and R, I think.
Okay.
But yeah,
something like that.
Right.
So these are really basic, fundamental, almost primeval things about the way that we operate. And the thread here is that all of the nations that are being hammered are the ones that are based on, derived from, no matter how buggered up it might be now, but Christian law. Whatever people may think about that, that is just the truth of our situation. And it has brought certain terrible consequences, but overall it's put in a foundation that we all understand. And it's putting some decisions before all the logic and all the intellect can kick in. Like an emotional explosion has to take place. And I've always felt that as a people, we're lousy at defending ourselves, but we're absolutely brilliant. We're off the charts when it comes to creating stuff. And of course, we're being restricted in that way. And that echo of Christian law is the thing that the globalists, let's use that word, are determined to extinguish totally. And many people on our own side understandably go, well, we can't get all involved with churches again. And I totally understand, because they are wolves in sheep's clothing too. They've been subverted as well. But if you get down to the essence of it, as normal human beings, we're talking about our way of life, and it's being wiped out. So all of our governments are basically over on the other side. We can't achieve a result through political paths, even though we talk about it here, because I guess we're kind of looking for a glimmer of hope. But I do think, just looking at the AFD situation, at the good things that Trump says on Monday, and then the incredibly insane things he says on Tuesday, i.e., we're going to have AI and we're going to create all these, unique vaccines for your genetic code and all this stuff. We don't want any of this. But of course, no one listens to us,
Paul, you just said something about Christianity being perhaps the reason or the main target to be wiped out. You may be right partly, I think, but I know you are also on the side of a race question, and I think it's much more the race question, because when we are talking about white people being much more creative, much more productive, etc., this has nothing to do with Christian belief. This is something to do with race, and when we come to the race question, we must see, we must look at the fundamental basics of the race question. Where did these races start to exist? Where did they come into place? When was the first white, for example? What is the differences? What are the differences? What is the difference?
There's a whole series of shows on this. I think I agree with you, what you say. There's just because I think it comes down to the definition of words. And I'm probably using the word Christian in a way that I haven't made clear when I just spoke it then. I view Christians as a race of people. The only people that are Christians are white people. To me, Christians are a race of people. And the religious stuff is a thing bolted on top to keep the law fresh. I've mentioned this before. There's a guy who lives over the road from me. He's a mechanic. He's a builder. He's a fantastic guy. And I would define him as a Christian. He wouldn't have me define him that in a conversation, because he would rightfully assume that I'm talking about somebody that goes to a church and subscribes to some sort of doctrine or this, that, and the other. Not that that's necessarily bad, but it's become so muddied. Over here, it's not as if I'm saying, well, we've all got to run back to a church. Why would you do that? It's literally done nothing for the people. It doesn't do anything. But I define it as a Christian way of life, as literally following a way of life. And many people are doing that. The good people that you're talking about, the productive people, are doing exactly what my definition of it is. It's not about necessarily going off and doing all that other stuff. That's secondary. And my take on it is, when you actually study the scripture and look at it, it's about living this honorable, ethical, moral, chivalrous life, which actually I think we resonate to quite naturally. And we've got people that want to live a different way. Now, I don't mind that they want to live a different way. I just mind that they've been brought into our homes, I'm a locationist. I think the issue is about location. And they've been brought in our homes with a specific intent to disrupt us, because if you study history, it always works. Every single thing that we've built goes down the toilet because we get disrupted by other elements being brought in against the will of the people who are denied a voice, don't have one, because we trust our leaders. And this is the big problem I think we have internally as well. People naturally want to trust an authority outside of themselves. And what we're facing is you can't do that anymore. You actually couldn't do it a long time.
Authority outside of themselves is the state, and that's basically taking the place of the mother and the father and the family, which is like a microcosm of it. And if you go back to the original intention of the word race, I think of Samuel Johnson's definition, which is from the 1700s, where his definition of it is basically family. Your family is your race, and vice versa. To me, when I hear the word race now, I think of synonymous with family.
Well, we're going to carry this theme on in next week's show. I've got to wrap up because we're actually going to hard stop exactly at 11 o'clock tonight. I just thought I'd let you know. We've got about 4 minutes to go. So next week, I want to carry that. Next week's notes for my show, for the show for next week, I've got is why women shouldn't have the vote. You can come back, Monica, if you want to get stuck in. I'm using it as a contentious thing to kick it off.
Yeah, please.
Because I'm
sure that will be a most interesting conversation, because I'm talking a lot these days about the damage of the feminist movement.
That's what we're going to go into. I came across a book the other day by an English guy, J.D. Unwin. He died. He wrote this book about 1934. He died a couple of years later. It's called Sex and Culture, and the things he discovered. Basically, I'll leave you on this rather sobering note. Whenever women have been emancipated in a civilization and have risen in power, that civilization has died every single time. And there's a reason for it. And I want to really explore it. It's not pointing the finger at women. It's pointing at this arrangement that it goes madly wrong. And there's a reason for it. And it's law. It's inescapable. For us as a race, it's absolutely inescapable, which is why, of course, I don't hold out too much hope for the AFD or for any of the people running around over here. And this is the attack that's taking place on us. But listen, we've got a few minutes to go. There's a song going to kick in. So any final words from anybody? Thomas, I'll let you wrap up a little bit. We've got just under 3 minutes. So if you could wrap up in half a minute or something.
May I greet someone?
Yes.
So I send my greetings to Melinda in California and Matthew in California.
Lovely. Fantastic. Okay, Melinda in California. Brilliant. That's lovely. Well, great. Well, look, we'll do another show soon. I'm planning to try and get a second show in during the week. I've been banging on about this and I haven't found the time yet. But I want to thank you all for your patience tonight, because obviously there's been quite a few of us around the microphone. I think it's gone really well. It's a tricky subject to start off with, but we've moved it around, and at least we're ending on looking at a positive thing. There is a line from Dresden right now to today. There really is. And the more clear we get about that, and the more we have the ability to inform others outside of this echo chamber, the better, because it's got to stop being an echo chamber. We've got to send that echo out into the world, and it is happening. I just think hopefully we're helping speeding up. Monica, any final words from Canada about to be subsumed into America?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I just have enjoyed this so very much. I mean, it's been heavy topics, of course, talking about Dresden, the anniversary of that, which was just probably one of the biggest crimes in history in wartime. But anyway, it has been a very interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed being on with all these wonderful people on the panel that you have invited, Paul, and what a pleasure to be on with you again on your show. So
you're welcome back anytime. You're welcome back anytime, Monica. And
I look forward to that.
Lovely.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch a lot more. We're going to get a lot more busy this year. We have to. Patrick and Eric, you don't get to say anything because you speak every week. Okay.
What about me?
Oh, yeah, Paul. Well, you've only got 5 seconds. Paul has been relaying this everywhere. You're a bit late to the show. You could have spoken any... I didn't bring you in. Yeah. Hey, if I turn up tomorrow, you can be rude to me and keep me out of the loop, okay? I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, Paul. Anyway, listen, I got to wrap up.
We cover heavy topics in a light and balanced manner.
We do. And there's a few laughs along the way. Eric, thank you very much for your time, and you too also. everybody that's been here listening to us this evening. We'll be back again same time next week. We're going to hard break and end right now. If you guys want to carry on talking after the show, you can. But we're ending up here for this time. So we'll see you all next week. Thanks, everyone, and bye for now.